Hey listeners, this is your host, Cosmic Naruto. Thank you so much for being here. You can check other videos too. Now let's get on to the video. We start out in the home of Ash Ketchum, who lives in the town of Pallet. He has just turned 10 years old and starts out on his Pokemon journey tomorrow. It's an exciting day for anyone, which is why Ash is still when he should be in bed resting up for tomorrow. The door to Ash's room opens up and in walks Delia Ketchum, Ash's mother. Ash, do you know what time it is? Delia asks. No, I don't. I lost track of the time a while ago, Ash answers. It's way past your bedtime. Now go on and hop into bed, Delia tells Ash. But Mom, I'm too excited about tomorrow to go to bed now, Ash replied. Can't I stay up a little bit longer? I guess it can't be helped, Delia thinks to herself. Okay, she says. I'll let you stay up but only if you think about which Pokemon you will choose tomorrow, and she turns on program about the 3 starter Pokemon that a trainer gets to choose from in Pallet Town. There's Charmander, a fire type, Squirtle, a water type, and Bulbasaur, a grass type. Now then, Ash thinks to himself, which one should I choose? Charmander has the firepower to take on any trainer. Then again, Squirtle can help me get across great expanses of water so that I don't have to wait for boats to travel to islands and back. Then again, Bulbasaur can help me get through dense forests by helping make a path through it. After a few minutes have gone by, Ash thinks, this is a really tough decision. All 3 of them are good starter Pokemon. I guess I'll just head off to bed and sleep on this decision. Now Ash is asleep and dreaming about the 3 Pokemon that he believes he will choose from. Little does he know that he is in for big surprises come tomorrow. Naruto World. Naruto is fighting Sasuke in his Stage 2 Curse Mark form with his own Kyuubi Cloak Single Tail form. It has been a pretty even fight up to this point. Sasuke is fighting in order to go see Orochimaru in order to receive training from him, and Naruto is fighting to bring Sasuke back to Konoha. Sasuke, Naruto yells as he charges towards Sasuke. I am going to bring you back if it's the last thing I do. Sasuke yells back as he flies towards Naruto. If I have anything to say about it, it will be the last thing that you do. Just before they hit each other, they both turn slightly in different directions and end up missing each other and turn back around to prepare to charge at each other again. I must get strong not to kill my brother Itachi, and if you refuse to let me go I will have to kill you. Sasuke yells out. If that is how you feel about this, then let's finish this, Naruto shouts back. I will, Sasuke replies. Heart. At that moment Hinata jumps out from behind some rocks, where she was hiding and watching the battle the whole time. I won't let you kill Naruto-kun. I will protect the man I love at all costs, even my life. Hinata yelled while putting her body between Sasuke and Naruto. To say the least, this shocked Naruto completely, since Hinata has always been so quiet before now. To this statement Sasuke replies, fine. I'll just have to kill you both then, and charges at Hinata and Naruto. I can't let this happen. I really didn't want to use this jutsu since I haven't perfected it yet, but it's the only way to get us both out of here in time, Naruto thought. At this point Kakashi arrives at the battleground just in time to see that he is too late to stop Sasuke from killing Naruto. Yusen. The last of his energy, Naruto grabs Hinata's leg and forms a hand sign. Just before Sasuke hits Hinata with the Chidori, there's a sudden flash of bright light, and when the light dims down, Kakashi and Sasuke see that Hinata and Naruto have vanished into thin air. Kakashi and Sasuke look at each other for a second, then Sasuke turns around and continues on towards Orochimaru's hideout. Seeing that Sasuke will seriously kill anyone who gets in his way, Kakashi heads back to Konoha to give the 5th Hokage, Tsunade, a report about what happened. Pokemon World. Back in Ash's room, a light appears, not bright enough to wake Ash up. And Hinata and Naruto appear on the floor. Hinata is unconscious and Naruto is conscious and looks around and notices that their surroundings are unfamiliar to him. And he looks down at Hinata's unconscious body, kisses her on the forehead, and whispers, "Thank you," into her ear, and then passes into unconsciousness lying across Hinata's body. Dreamscape. Naruto starts dreaming, and in his dream Kyuubi appears in front of him. Where are we? Naruto asks Kyuubi. We are currently in your dreamscape. It is the only way we can talk while your body repairs itself, Kyuubi said in a broad voice. That's not what I mean, Naruto says. Where in the world are Hinata and I? From what I could see from the room we landed in, we are nowhere near Konoha. I don't really know where we are, but from what I can figure out from our surroundings, I would have to say that we jumped across dimensions and ended up here, Kyuubi said. Naruto looks questioningly at Kyuubi. Sorry, you completely lost me. Kyuubi closes his eyes, trying to think of a better way to explain it. Let's try this. A sudden aerial view of a few islands suddenly appears in front of them. Let's say each of these islands is their own dimensions. They live close together and yet do not know of each other's existences. When you used your teleportation jutsu, there was so much energy behind it that it is like we were shot out of a cannon on one island and landed on another island, Kyuubi explained. That makes a lot more sense, Naruto says. One more question. How is it that there was so much energy behind my teleportation jutsu? I was badly injured and my chakra level was low. I shouldn't have had enough energy to do something like this. I'm afraid that was my fault, Kyuubi admits embarrassed. You didn't know how low your chakra level was. If you were to have tried to complete the jutsu on your own, you would have died, killing me as well. I had to step in without you knowing about it and provide you with the chakra for the jutsu. But since I was also concentrating on healing your wounds so that you wouldn't bleed to death, I accidentally gave you too much chakra, resulting in a super ARG teleportation jutsu and resulted in our appearance in this world. Okay, that answers the major questions, but now I have a few minor questions, Naruto said. We still have some time, so go ahead and ask the questions. Remember, in a dreamscape hours can pass in only a few minutes, Kyuubi said as he lays down. Good. Naruto says. First, why was it that I was conscious and Hinata was unconscious when we arrived? Quite simple really, Kyuubi said. Transporting across dimensions really stresses a person's body, and since I was healing you at the time of the transportation, there was less stress on your body. But only enough that you were to stay conscious for a few minutes. Secondly, how long will it take before we can get back home? Asks Naruto. A few years, I would guess, replies Kyuubi. What? Why so long? Naruto asked. It's because I used up a lot of chakra and I am finding it takes a while to gather chakra since we are not in our home dimension, Kyuubi replies. Well then, what will we do to pass the time until we can go home? Naruto asked. No clue. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. One final question. How is it that you know so much about this? Naruto asked, tilting his head to the side like a fox. Before I was forced to attack Konoha, I was quite the scholar. I would travel dimensions gathering information that could come in handy, Kyuubi said. Now are you finished? For now, answered Naruto. Mind if I ask you a question now? Kyuubi asked. You just did, but sure, Naruto said with a grin. Why did you want to know all of this? Kyuubi asked, looking irritated. I need to have some answers for when Hinata wakes up, Naruto said in a laid-back voice. This brings me to my next question. Hinata outright admitted that she loves you, and I want to know, do you return her love? Kyuubi asked. I don't know, Naruto replied. I have respect for her for willing to go that far to protect me, and I care enough to not let her throw her life away, but I can't really say whether or not I love Hinata at this moment. It is something you may want to figure out soon. After all, you are going to be together for a while, Kyuubi informing him. I think that's enough for now. Your body is still injured, so I need to heal you fully before anyone wakes up, and you need to rest up. For tomorrow. Wasn't I already resting since we are in my dreamscape talking? Naruto asks. Not at all. When we use the dreamscape to communicate, it is as if you were awake, Kyuubi replied. Also, I will be too exhausted to communicate with you for a while, which means you won't hear from me much. With that being said, Kyuubi vanishes along with the dreamscape and Naruto falls asleep, figuratively speaking, to wake up to who knows what. How will Hinata react when she finds out they are on some unknown planet in a dimension not of their own? Find out next time in Naruto's new adventure. PLZRR. Morning has come and gone already and Ash is still asleep. It is currently late afternoon, about 3 p.m., and Ash is just now waking up. Yawns. What time is it? Ash think. He turns and looks at the clock. I'm so late. I need to get to Professor Oak's lab quickly. Ash jumps out of bed and starts running for the door and trips over Naruto and Hinata. The jolt from Ash tripping over them starts to wake up Naruto and Hinata. Ash rubs his head. What did I trip over? Ash turns around as Naruto and Hinata start to get up and screams. Who are you? What are you doing here? Naruto helps Hinata get up and says without looking at Ash, it is courteous to introduce yourself before asking someone's name. Sorry about that, Ash says apologetically, my name is Ash Ketchum. That's better, Naruto says, I am Naruto Uzumaki and this is Hinata Hyuga. Pleased to meet you, Hinata says. Likewise, says Ash, as to what we are doing here that will take a little bit of explaining. Naruto says. All three of them sit on the floor while Naruto explains what the Kyuubi told him last night to both Ash and Hinata. As you can see, we're a bit of a situation. We are going to be stuck in your world for a while and we don't know what we can do in this world to pass the time. Naruto says. Hold up a second, I'm still to wrap my mind around what you just told me, Ash says. You're telling me that there exist many worlds at the same time, we just can't see them. From what I understand, that is correct, Naruto says. Ash suddenly realizes that he forgot that he's late to see Professor Oak. Naruto, Hinata, I've got an idea that may be able to solve your problem, but we got to go now. Ash says. Ash runs out the door with Naruto and Hinata right behind him and arrives shortly at Professor Oak's lab. The three of them walk through the front door and see Professor Oak with his back to them working on something. You know you're late, Ash, Professor Oak says. Yeah, I know, and I also brought some guests, Ash says. Professor Oak turns around and sees Naruto and Hinata and asks, who are these people? This is Naruto Uzumaki, Ash says and motions toward Naruto, and this is Hinata Hyuga, and motions towards Hinata. Naruto, Hinata, this is Professor Oak and he might be able to help you too. Help them with what? Professor Oak asks. I guess I'll need to explain this all over again, Naruto says. No, Naruto. Let me handle explaining this to Professor Oak, Ash says. Professor Oak leads everyone to some couches and everyone sits down while Ash explains what Naruto told him to Professor Oak. That makes a lot of sense. It explains what their clothes look out of place. Professor Oak says, what was this idea of yours, Ash? Professor Oak asks. I was figuring that since I start my Pokemon journey today that Naruto and Hinata could join me and we could travel together, Ash answers. Which reminds me that I need to give you your starter Pokemon, says Professor Oak. Unfortunately, since you were so late in getting here, the other trainers came by and got Bulbasaur, Squirtle and Charmander. I had already caught an extra Pokemon knowing this, but it means that you don't have a choice in which Pokemon is your starter. That's fine by me. I'm just glad to be able to have a starter Pokemon, says Ash. Excuse me, says Naruto. I hate to interrupt you two, but what are these Pokemon that you speak of? That's right, since you two don't come from this world and know nothing about Pokemon, says Professor Oak. If you'll follow me, I show you what Pokemon are. Naruto, Hinata, and Ash all follow Professor Oak to a machine where Professor Oak pushes a button and a Pokeball comes up from a hidden compartment in the machine. Is that it? It doesn't look like something we would want to spend our time on, Naruto says. No, this is not it. This is just a tool used to catch Pokemon. This is Kae Da Pokeball, says Professor Oak. The Pokemon is inside of the Pokeball. He hands the Pokeball over to Ash. Since this is your starter Pokemon, I'll let you do the honors of releasing it from the Pokeball. Pokeball go, Ash says as he throws the Pokeball, and from the Pokeball a Pikachu materializes in a light that's bright but only just bright enough to be a light. How cute, Hinata says and picks up the Pikachu and rubs her cheek against Pikachu's cheek. I wouldn't do that, Professor Oak says. Why not? Hinata asks. Sparks start coming out of Pikachu's red cheeks and then a bolt of electricity comes out and shocks Hinata. Hinata. Naruto runs over to Hinata. Are you all right? I'm fine, says Hinata. It just took me by surprise, that's all. That's the reason why, Professor Oak says. Those red spots on Pikachu's cheeks are its electric sacs where it gathers up electricity to use for attacks, and they are very sensitive. I think that's enough. Go ahead and recall Pikachu, Professor Oak says. Okay then, says Ash. Pikachu. Return. A beam of red light comes out of the Pokeball and Pikachu dodges it. Pikachu, I said return. Pikachu dodges the beam of light again. Pikachu get in the Pokeball. Pika, Pika, says Pikachu as it shakes its head. You're saying that you don't want to stay in a Pokeball, says Ash. Pika, Pika, says Pikachu as it nods its head. That's unusual, says Professor Oak. Pokemon normally like to stay in Pokeballs. It's alright, Professor, says Ash. If my buddy doesn't want to stay in a Pokeball, then it can travel on my shoulder. Alright then, says Professor Oak. Normally you would recall a Pokemon by holding the Pokeball and call out the Pokemon and saying return. Now then, on to what I was going to tell you before. Professor Oak says, Pokemon are living creatures that have the ability to use elemental attacks. What people like Ash do is travel around the world catching Pokemon, having battles with other trainers, training their Pokemon, and, if they want to, competing in gym battles to win badges, and when they have 8 they can compete in the Pokemon League where the best trainers show up. What do you say, Naruto? Hinata. Would you like to journey with me? Ash asks. Would like to go, Hinata. Naruto asks. I'll go anywhere you go, Naruto, Hinata answers. I guess that answers that then. Naruto says, we're going to go with you, but don't we need our own Pokemon? I'm sure that Professor Oak can help us with that, says Ash. Is this true, Professor? Asks Naruto. Of course, says Professor Oak. I know a lot of people in the Kanto region. Here we are now. I can easily have someone send a couple of Pokemon to me for you too. All I need to know is which Pokemon it is that you want to start out with. Take a look at this book, which has information about the Pokemon that are in the Kanto region, and choose which Pokemon you want. Naruto and Hinata finally make up their mind after looking through the book for a few minutes. Alright then, which one have you chosen? Professor Oak asks. Naruto, how about we start with you? I have decided on Abra, says Naruto. Why would you pick that one? Asks Ash. Abra is one most useless Pokemon there is. Abra reminds me a lot of myself when I was first starting to become a ninja, answers Naruto. Well then, which one have you chosen, Hinata? Asks Professor Oak. I have decided on Chansey, answers Hinata. Let me just make a call, Professor Oak says. Professor Oak calls an old friend who happens to be a breeder, and in a couple of minutes 2 Pokeballs are sent through the teleporter. Here's Abra, Naruto, and here's your Chansey, Hinata, Professor Oak says when he hands over the Pokeballs. Ash, Pikachu, Naruto, Hinata head out of Professor Oak's lab, and as they depart they wave goodbye and head into the sunset. Naruto World. Kakashi gets back to Konoha and heads towards the Hokage's building. He gets to the Hokage's office and knocks on the door. Enter, says the 5th Hokage, Tsunade. I've returned from the battlefield where Naruto and Sasuke fought, says Kakashi. Where is Naruto? I would have thought that you would have brought him back with you, says Tsunade. When I arrived, Sasuke was about to deal the finishing blow to both Hinata and Naruto, and then there was a flash of light and they both just vanished, says Kakashi. Hold up a second, you said that Hinata was there as well, says Tsunade. That is correct, Kakashi replies. What was that girl doing there? Tsunade asks. We both know how much Hinata loves Naruto. I would guess that she thought that Naruto would help and followed him there, Kakashi replies. You also said there was a flash of light, Tsunade asks. That is correct, replies Kakashi. Considering the information you gave, I can only determine that Naruto wanted to protect Hinata and used some sort of teleportation jutsu to get them out of there in time. Which means that they could be anywhere, Tsunade says. What would you like me to do? Kakashi asks. I am giving you an order to make teams and have them spread out and not come back until they find Naruto, Tsunade says. Wouldn't that weaken the defenses of Konoha? Kakashi asks. TS is nothing compared to what will happen if Akatsuki manages to get their hands on the Kyuubi inside of Naruto. We have to find him before Akatsuki does, Tsunade says. As you wish, Kakashi says. Kakashi spends the rest of the day gathering up teams, and at sunset they leave the village to start searching for Naruto. Will Kakashi and the others ever figure out that Naruto is not in their world? How will Naruto Pokemon journey go? Thanks for reading, and I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Please rate, review Naruto Hinata, Ash, and Pikachu have made it to the outskirts of Pallet Town, and as the sunset turns the day into twilight, they hear someone running up from behind them. They turn around to see Professor Oak running towards them. "What are you doing here, Professor?" asks Naruto. "With all that was going on before you left, I forgot to give you all your Pokédexes and extra Pokeballs," said Professor Oak, and hands each of them 6 Pokeballs and a Pokédex. "What are these for?" asks Naruto. "Thanks, Professor," all 3 of them say. "One more thing before you go," says Professor Oak. "Ash, your mom asked me to give you this," and hands over to Ash a backpack with blankets and canteens for the tea. Of them, as well as a map of the Kanto region. "Your mother asked me to give these to you." It seems strange that she was prepared with 3 sets of items, Ash says. "It's as if she knew I had fellow travelers." "Of course she knew," Professor Oak says. "After I told her that was thoughtful of you," Hinata says. "Someone has to make sure that you have what you need," Professor Oak says. "Seriously though, thank you, Professor," Naruto says. "Anything else first before you head back?" "My full name is Samuel Oak. Just call me Sam, Naruto." "There's no need to be so official," Professor Oak says. "I'll try," Naruto says. "Also, since we are still pretty close to Pallet Town, there aren't too many wild Pokemon. I wish one would appear so that I could teach you how to catch Pokemon," Sam says. As if it was listening in, a Pidgey swoops down to land a little ways away from them. "That's really convenient," Sam says. "Who would like to catch this Pidgey?" "I think Hinata should catch this," Naruto says. "I agree completely," Ash says. "Are you sure?" Hinata asks. "Positive," both Ash and Naruto reply. Hinata presses the button and it grows from finger size to hand size. "Okay, what now?" Hinata asks. "Now if you flip open your Pokédex, you will see a list of attacks Chansey knows. Just declare an attack and Chansey will attack Pidgey with it," Sam says. Hinata opens up that Pokédex and sees that Chansey knows 2 moves. Tackle and Double Slap. "Use Tackle, Chansey," Hinata says hesitantly. Chansey charges at Pidgey and Pidgey takes flight and dodges just before Chansey hits. "Keep in mind that the opposing Pokemon can dodge an attack as well," Sam says. Pidgey turns around and starts flying back at Chansey. Chansey take the hit from Pidgey and use that chance to knock Pidgey down with Double Slap, Hinata says more decisively. As Pidgey strikes Chansey squarely in the chest, Chansey takes its hand and hits Pidgey down to the ground. "Now follow it up with Tackle," Hinata says, and Chansey more or less just lays down on Pidgey since Pidgey is at Chansey's feet. Pidgey lies on the ground not moving after Chansey gets up. "Oh no, is Pidgey all right? Did I go overboard?" Hinata frantically asks. Few seconds, the button flashing red and then it turns white. "There you go," Sam says. "You just caught Pidgey. You can let Pidgey out by doing the same thing as you did with Chansey and you'll see that Pidgey is fine. You most definitely look all right," Hinata says as she pets Pidgey's neck area. "You don't have to worry about going overboard with Pokemon." Hinata, "By the way, you had mentioned Pokemon centers. But what are they exactly?" Naruto asks. "Pokemon Center are essentially hospitals for Pokemon," Sam replies. "That's good to know," says Naruto. "I guess we'll see you later then, Professor," says Naruto. "I told you to call me Sam," Sam says, "and yes, I'll be seeing you later." Ash, Pikachu, Naruto, and Hinata depart from Sam and head off towards some wooded area. By this point it has gotten quite dark. By the time they reach the woods, it has gotten so dark that you can only make out basic shapes from the shadows. "It looks like it's about time to set up camp," says Ash as he stops at an area where the trees circle around them, leaving an area of open sky above them. "Let's go ahead and gather some twigs for kindling and some firewood," says Ash, and all 3 of them start gathering up wood in order to start a fire. "I'll go ahead and make the fire," says Ash. "How about you go find some food for us, Naruto?" "Sure thing," Naruto says. As Ash makes the fire by using the old-fashioned method of creating a spark by rubbing a twig against a log with a little bit of grass and some twigs in it to make a small fire to be built up, Naruto goes outside of the circle of trees so that Ash does not see what he is doing and makes a hand sign and whispers Shadow Clone Jutsu and makes a few clones to go searching for food. A few minutes later all the clones come back to the original spot W. Here Naruto had first made the jutsu with what food they gathered and Naruto dissipated the jutsu. Naruto enters into the circle of trees and says, I managed to find some apples for us to cook and eat. That's good, says Ash. Go ahead and put them next to the fire and we'll separate them up for everyone to eat. Naruto sets down the apples and they all start dividing them up between them. Including our Pokemon. I would guess that we would need 1 apple each for Pikachu, Abra, and Pidgey, and we'll need 2 apples each for you, me, Hinata, and Chansey. That uses up 9 of our 18 apples, says Ash. It looks like we've got enough for dinner tonight and breakfast tomorrow. Good job, Naruto. Thank you, says Naruto. Let's go ahead and bring out our Pokemon and have our meal then, says Ash. Let do it, Abra, Naruto says as he releases Abra. Come on out, Chansey and Pidgey, Hinata says as she releases them both, and Pidgey decides to roost on Hinata's shoulder after being released. Here you go, Ash says as he gives out the apples to everyone. Naruto, do you mind if I borrow one of your kunai to cut up this apple? Hinata asks. Of course not, Naruto replies and hands over one of his kunai from his weapon pouch. Hinata starts to cut up the apple into small enough pieces for Pidgey to eat and feeds them to Pidgey. You like that, don't you? Hinata asks Pidgey, and Pidgey answers with a chirp and a nod of its head. After everyone has finished eating they recall their Pokemon, put out the fire, and make their beds by leaning up against a tree and covering up with one of the blankets. Hinata waits wait for everyone else to go to sleep, and after that she goes up to the tree where Naruto is sleeping and decided to put her head on Naruto's shoulder and fall asleep. This wakes Naruto up and seeing Hinata asleep on his shoulder he decides to not wake her. Instead he out his head on the side of her head and falls asleep. A few hours later something wakes Naruto up and gets up and sets up Hinata up against a tree. He then walks over to the outskirts of the circle of trees. Hinata wakes up and goes over to Naruto and asks, What's wrong, Naruto? I don't know, replies Naruto, something just seems off. At that moment he sees the shadow of a flying ship and it looks to be firing in something, but it's too small to make out what it is. The ship finally manages to hit whatever it is and it comes crashing down into the forest nearby. Come on, says Naruto, someone might be hurt. We have to go help them out, and drags Hinata along to where the thing crashed. When they get there they see a crater, and inside of the crater is a creature that looks like a pink cat with a long tail, and it is badly injured. The creature wakes up and seeing Naruto and Hinata it tries to fly away, but it can't because it is so badly injured. Don't try to move, says Naruto, we're here to help you out, and picks up the creature up. It struggles a little bit and then falls unconscious. What was it that the professor said we should do in this case? Naruto asks Hinata. Hinata thinks about for a second. He mentioned that a Pokemon Center was a hospital for a Pokemon. I think we should to a Pokemon Center, Hinata replies. Let's wake Ash up and figure out where the nearest Pokemon Center is, Naruto says. Naruto and Hinata head back to the campsite and go on to wake Ash up. What's up? Ash asks drowsily. We found a badly injured creature in the woods and we need to know where the nearest Pokemon Center is. Naruto says. Hold on a second, let me grab the map, says Ash. He pulls out the map and looks at it. It looks like the nearest Pokemon Center is in Viridian City. It's about a mile in that direction, and Ash points in the direction. Ash then gathers up everything and put it into his backpack. Hinata, pick up Ash, we need to get there quickly, Naruto says. Hinata grabs Ash and puts him on her back. Ready to go? Naruto asks. Yep, Hinata replies. Let go then, Naruto says. Make certain you hold on tight, Hinata tells Ash. Naruto, carrying the creature, and Hinata, carrying Ash, start jumping quickly from branch to branch in order to get out of the forest quickly. After they get out of the forest they dash to the city, and when they reach the Pokemon Center Naruto starts banging on the door. Open up, Naruto yells, we've got an emergency here. My name is Nurse Joy and what's going on here? Nurse Joy asks as she opens up the door. We've got a badly injured creature here, Naruto replies. Nurse Joy looks at the creature and says, you're right about that. Chansey, bring in the stretcher. Fast, and a pair of Chanseys come in with a stretcher. Take this creature to the ER. Stat. Hold on 1 second. They all hear a voice come from the other room. A female officer stands up and starts walking across the room. I'm Officer Jenny and I need to take a look at that creature. Officer Jenny takes a look at the creature and says, this is the legendary Pokemon Mew. You're all under arrest, and brings out the handcuffs. The Chanseys continue taking Mew to the ER. What for? Asks Naruto. We've had reports of a team of Pokemon hunters going after Mew, therefore since you were bringing Mew you must be the Pokemon hunters, Officer Jenny says. That's not true at all, Hinata says. We found this Pokemon in a crater after someone shot it down. A likely story, says Officer Jenny. If you see a NT prove that you're not the Pokemon hunters, I'm going to have to take you in. A Pokédex, says Officer Jenny. This should prove who you are. Do you other two have a Pokédex? Officer Jenny asks. Yes, both Ash and Hinata say, and they both pull out their Pokédex. Okay, let's take a look here. Officer Jenny says, we have one Ash Ketchum, one Naruto Uzumaki, and one Hinata Hyuga. Everything looks to be in order. Officer Jenny hands each of them back their Pokédex and apologetically says, I'm very sorry about judging you like that. We already had an incident where one of the Growliths that we were training got stolen from us and I'm on edge. It's all right, we understand, Hinata says. I really hope that Mew is going to be okay, Naruto says. I'm certain that we are all worrying about Mew, Hinata says. Hinata and Naruto now wait outside the ER and wait for news on Mew. Mystery flying ship. I'd hate to tell the leader what happened, Mystery Man says. You're not the only one, Mystery Woman says. Whether or not you want to, we have to tell the leader because he's going to check in soon, Mystery Pokemon says. A minute later a screen turns on and the shadow of a man appears on the screen. Have you managed to capture Mew yet? Shadow Man asks. We have good news and bad news, Mystery Man says. The good news is that we managed to shoot down Mew and badly injured it, Mystery Woman says. The bad news is that when we got to the place where Mew crashed, Mew wasn't there, Mystery Pokemon says. How dumb can you be? Shadow Man asks. If Mew wasn't where it crashed, it either means that Mew flew away or that someone found Mew first. Since Mew couldn't possibly fly away, it means that someone found Mew first. If they were to find Mew in that condition, they would obviously take it to the nearest Pokemon Center to be healed. Shadow Man says. Now then, which Pokemon Center is closest to you? Shadow Man asks. That would be the one in Viridian City, Mystery Man says. Then go there and get Mew, Shadow Man says, and the screen turns off. Isn't Viridian City where we took the Growlithe from? Mystery Pokemon asks. That's right, Mystery Woman says. Won't they be in for a surprise when they see us again? Mystery Man says. Set course for Viridian City, Mystery Woman says. Aye, Mystery Pokemon says. The mystery flying ship, which looks like a zeppelin, turns around and starts heading for our Viridian City, and the sun starts to rise, and on the side of the ship there's a giant red R. Naruto World. A whole day has gone by of searching for Naruto has come and gone without any sign of Naruto. Further down the path there's one of the Akatsuki, Itachi Uchiha. Itachi senses the approach of one of the searching teams and hides from them. The search team stops right by where Itachi hid. Man T. Here's no sign of that Naruto Uzumaki, Junin 1 says. You heard the Hokage. We need to find Naruto before Akatsuki does, Junin 2 says. Quit chatting, you two, Junin 3 says. Remember that anyone could hear us. Besides, we have a large area to search. The Hokage said that Naruto could be anywhere in this world. Let's get back to searching now. The three Junins head off, leaving Itachi all by himself. This is an interesting bit of information. Itachi thinks to himself, I'd better tell the of Akatsuki about this, and Itachi calls a meeting of all the Akatsuki using a special communication jutsu. What's up, Itachi? Kisame Hoshigaki asks. I've got some big news, Itachi says. Apparently Konoha has sent most of their Junin to find the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, meaning that they don't know where H is, which means that he should be easy pickings if we find him first. You're completely right, Itachi, Akatsuki's leader says. Akatsuki member is to abandon their current mission and search for the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. That's an order. This meeting ends now. Every Akatsuki member breaks communications and head out to search their own individual areas. Will Mew be alright? Who is this mystery team after Mew? And, although you probably figured it out by now, will Akatsuki or Konoha be the first to figure out that Naruto is no longer a part of their world? The only way to find out is to keep reading. Please rate and reply. A few minutes before sunrise we see Nurse Joy step out of the ER with Mew flying right next to her, and she looks over and sees Naruto and Hinata fast asleep on the bench leaning against each other. That's sweet. Nurse Joy says, it looks like they really cared about whether or not you were okay. I'm sure that they'll be pleased to know that you're all healed up. Mew flies over to them and pats them both on the head. Both Hinata and Naruto stir but don't wake up. Nurse Joy and Mew head towards the entrances and go outside, where Ash is outside just staring at the sky with Pikachu on his shoulder. What are you doing out here? Nurse Joy asks. I couldn't sleep much, Ash says, so I came outside to get some fresh air and to see the sunrise. That's good. New. RSE Joy and looks at the ground. It should be a good sunrise since was raining while Mew was healing but has cleared up now. How is Mew doing? Ash asks. Mew is perfectly fine, Nurse Joy says as Mew flies out from behind her as flies in front of Ash. I came out here to release Mew since Mew's a wild Pokemon and I wouldn't feel right about keeping Mew here. That's very nice, Ash says. Goodbye Mew, it was a pleasure to meet you. Mew flies off waving goodbye to Ash and Nurse Joy. After Mew leaves their sight she says, I might as well get breakfast ready. Ash, would you like to help? No thanks, Ash says. I still have yet to see the sunrise. Okay then, Nurse Joy says and heads into the kitchen to start cooking. A few minutes later the sun starts to rise over the horizon. Wow, it really is a beautiful sunrise, Ash says. It's too bad Naruto and Hinata are missing this. When the sun is halfway risen, a rainbow appears in front of Ash and Pikachu. What a beautiful rainbow, Ash thinks. Another MI. Mute later a figure appears in the sky heading towards Ash and Pikachu. When it gets close enough for Ash and Pikachu to see clearly, they see that it is a giant golden-looking Pokemon and it flies right over the Pokemon Center. What was that? Ash asks Pikachu. Pikachu says and shrugs its shoulders. Let's go back inside and see if Nurse Joy needs any help in the kitchen, Ash says, and they walk inside. Nurse Joy hears Ash and Pikachu come inside and asks, what happened? All of a sudden everything went dark for a second. A giant flying Pokemon flew over the Pokemon Center, Ash says. It looks just like the Pokemon in the bottom right corner of Pokemon photos behind your desk in the lobby. That explains a lot, Nurse Joy says. Do you know the name of that Pokemon? Ash asks. I'm sorry, I don't, Nurse Joy says. That's okay, Ash says. Would you like some help in the kitchen? He asks. Sure, Nurse Joy replies, and Ash joins her in the kitchen and Pikachu waits at one of the tables in the kitchen area. A few minutes later the door opens up and Officer Jenny walks in. How was your night? Nurse Joy asks. Lousy, Officer Jenny replies. I have no clues about the thieves who took our grow. Vlith and stayed up worrying about what they might be doing to it. You need to relax a little bit, Nurse Joy says. How about a cup of herbal tea? She asks. I would love a cup of herbal tea, Officer Jenny replies. Nurse Joy makes a pot of herbal tea and brings a cup over to Officer Jenny. How's Mew doing? Officer Jenny asks as she sips her tea. Mew is just fine, Nurse Joy says. It healed up quicker than I thought. By sunrise Mew was fully healed and I took Mew out and released it into the wild. What? Why'd you do that? Officer Jenny asks. I didn't feel right about keeping it here when it's a wild Pokemon. Nurse Joy says. Don't you understand that if the hunters get their hands on Mew that anything could happen? Officer Jenny says. I understand that, Nurse Joy says, but I need to follow what I think is right and therefore I had to let Mew go. If anything happens because of this, you're the one who's at fault. Officer Jenny says. I gladly accept the consequences of my action, Newer. Say Joy says, that is if there turn out to be any. That's enough about that subject, Officer Jenny says. How are Naruto and Hinata doing? She asks. They're doing fine, Nurse Joy says. or at least that's what I think. They're still asleep and therefore haven't had a chance to talk to them. They must have been tired from yesterday, Officer Jenny says. I would agree with that, Nurse Joy says. As Ash gets close to finishing up the cooking, the smell fills up the room. Something smells good, Officer Jenny says. What are you cooking back there? She asks. A classic breakfast of eggs, bacon, and toast, Ash replies. Will it be done soon? Officer Jenny asks. A few more minutes and everything will be done, Ash replies. Meanwhile in Viridian Forest something is happening. We see Mew sitting in a tree. Mew looks like it is in thought and then Mew suddenly takes off and heads back to Viridian City. Back at the Pokemon Center we see Naruto starting to wake up. What smells so good? Naruto thinks. As he gets up he lays Hinata across the bench so as not to wake her up. What's going on? Naruto asks as he enters the kitchen area. Hello sleepyhead. I see you're finally up, Ash says. To answer your question, I was just cooking some breakfast for all of us. That sounds good, Naruto says. Can I go ahead and take a couple of plates for me and Hinata? He asks. Go ahead, I just finished cooking, Ash replies. Naruto grabs 2 plates and brings them out to where Hinata is sleeping still. He sets one of the plates down and shakes Hinata's shoulder. Come on Hinata, it's time to wake up, Naruto says. Hinata slowly opens her eyes then sits up and stretches her arms. What's up Naruto? She asks. Naruto points at that ceiling. That's up, he says with a grin, but never mind that it's breakfast time, and hands her one of the plates. This puts a smile on her face and she starts eating. This is really good, Hinata says. Who made this? She asks. Ash did, Naruto says with a sullen look on his face. After Hinata gets finished eating she looks over at Naruto and sees that he has barely touched his food and looks down. What's wrong Naruto? She asks. Nothing's wrong, Naruto says and starts eating quickly. You're right, this is good, he says. Come on Naruto, I know you better than that, Hinata says. After all, I've been watching you for the longest time. I know that there is something on your mind, now tell me. Naruto sets down his fork and says, it's about Mew. I know Mew got fully healed but I worry about what will happen to it. Someone with evil intentions was either trying to kill Mew or capture Mew without any consideration to whether or not Mew got badly injured. Those people are still out there and there's no one to watch after Mew. I'm sure that Mew is going to be fine. Hi, Hinata says cheerfully, trying to cheer Naruto up. Naruto thinks about what she said and then smiles and says, you're right Hinata. I'm just thinking about this too much. Then Naruto finishes eating his breakfast. At this moment outside the Pokemon Center Mew lands on the roof and waits patiently walking the area right outside the door. Naruto and Hinata walk into the kitchen with their empty plates and walks over to Ash. Thanks for the meal, they both say. It was delicious. No problem, Ash says back. It was my pleasure. Here, let us help by doing the dishes, Naruto says. Hinata and Naruto start on the dishes. After a half hour Naruto and Hinata finish the dish and pack up everything and prepare to head out the door. It was a pleasure to meet you both, all three of them say to Officer Jenny and Nurse Joy. Wait, Officer Jenny says, before you go I have a gift for each of you, and hand each of them what looks like a belt with clips attached to them. What is this? Naruto asks. That is a Pokeball belt, Officer Jenny replies. It is used to hold your Pokeballs so that it makes it less likely to lose them. How does it work? Hinata asks. You just put your Pokeballs in one of the clips and a tiny magnet keeps it in place. And you wear it like a belt. Officer Jenny replies. Naruto, Hinata, and Ash put the Pokeballs in the clips. Ash doesn't need to organize his since he only as Pikachu, and Pikachu always rides on his shoulder when traveling. Naruto puts Abra first since Abra is his only one. Hinata decides to put Pidgey first and follow up with Chansey. I guess we'll be seeing you then, Naruto says. Goodbye, Officer Jenny and Nurse Joy say. Ash, Pikachu, Naruto and Hinata then head out the door, and right when they get outside there's a big crash and in front of them a ship of some sort is in front of them. What happened? Officer Jenny asks. Some sort of ship crashed in the street in front of us, Ash replies. The ship's door opens and out comes a man with blue Aaron wearing a white shirt and pants and a red R on the shirt, a red-headed woman wearing the exact same thing and a Pokemon that looks like cat with a gold charm in its forehead. I'm James, the blue-haired man says. I'm Jessie, the red-haired woman says. The name's Meowth, the Pokemon says, and we're here for the Mew you brought here, they all say together. I'm sorry to say that Mew is ALR. Edie gone. Nurse Joy says, well then we'll just take your Pokemon then, Jessie says. We've also got a surprise for you Officer Jenny, Meowth says, you can come on out now. Out step a Pokemon that looks like a puppy dog and on its head is what looks like some sort of black crown. What have they done to you Growlithe? Officer Jenny thinks to herself and she takes a step forward. Growlithe fire a flamethrower at Officer Jenny's feet, James says and Growlithe shoots flames from its mouth just in front of Officer Jenny's feet. Seeing what Officer Jenny tried to do Hinata asks, do you know that Pokemon? Yes, Officer Jenny says sadly, that is the Growlithe that was taken from us. And you will never get Growlithe back, Jessie says, as long as he is wearing that device it is forced to do whatever we say. As long as Growlithe is wearing that device Ash thinks, this gives me an idea, and says, Naruto bring out your Abra. How is Abra going to help us out right now? Naruto asks, you saw it Abra is one of the most useless Pokemon there is. I said that because the only moves Abra knows is teleport, Ash replies. I see what he's thinking. Naruto thinks and grabs Abra's Pokeball and presses the button. Let do this Abra, Naruto says as he throws the Pokeball. Abra materializes in a white light and the Pokeball comes back to his hand. Abra used teleport to Growlithe's head grab that device on its head and teleport back here with it, Naruto says. 1 second Abra is where Naruto threw the Pokeball, the next second it is on Growlithe's head grabbing the device, and a 3rd second Abra is next to Naruto with the device. Kind of hard to control Growlithe without this, Naruto says as he shows them the device in his hand. Growlithe turns around and looks at Jessie, James, and Meowth. Then it growls at them and shoots a flamethrower at them. Come on over here Growlithe, Naruto says sweetly and Growlithe comes jogging over to Naruto. Now just wait here, Naruto says. Naruto takes a step forward and says, it's time for you to pay. How dare you nearly kill a creature like Mew and how dare you force a Pokemon to do something it doesn't want to do. Naruto's body starts shaking out of anger. Naruto's eyes start glowing red and red chakras starts seeping out of his body. Seeing this Hinata runs right in front of Naruto, hugs him, and says, calm down Naruto they're not worth it. This snaps Naruto out of it and he sincerely says, thank you Hinata. I came close to losing it. He then hugs Hinata back. How do you plan to make us pay when you only have an Abra? James asks and besides we have 2 more Pokemon. James throws a Pokeball saying, go coughing, and Jessie throws a Pokeball saying, go Ekans, and an Ekans and coughing materializes. Out loud Naruto says, I'll show you, and whispers to Hinata, could you do me a favor use your taijutsu to knock them back into their ship. Hinata whispers back in a jokingly tone, only if you let me sleep next to you every night without complaining. Naruto whispers back with a grin, I haven't complained yet have I? Hinata takes a step back from Naruto and says, let's get to work. Hinata then makes a hand sign and the veins in her Yi and next to them bulge as she activates her Byakugan. Hinata then runs up to them and uses 8 trigrams 64 palms to knock Jessie, James, Ekans, coughing, and Meowth into the ship. Good job Hinata, Naruto says, it's my turn now, and he uses Shadow Clone Jutsu to make a single Shadow Clone and as they go flying off you hear them say, Team Rocket's blasting off. Mew was watching the whole battle. From the roof and nods its head as if in an approving way. Who are those people? Naruto asks as he walks back. From what I could tell of their uniform they are a part of a team of Pokemon thieves. Called Team Rocket, Officer Jenny says, but more importantly how did you do that? She asks. That's a long story, Naruto says and he explains everything about his and Hinata's world to Officer Jenny. I don't know if I fully understand everything but from what I understand you aren't from our world and that is why you are able to do these things, Officer Jenny says. If you want to simplify it then yes, Naruto says. Well, I had better bring Growlithe back to the station, says Officer Jenny as she gets up. Officer Jenny starts walking off and says, come on Growlithe. Growlithe barks and shakes. Its head then heads over and sits down next to Naruto. Take a look at that, Officer Jenny says. Apparently since you rescued Growlithe from Team Rocket's control it wants to go with you. Is that true? Naruto asks Growlithe. Growl. Growlithe. Growlithe says and nods its head. Do I have your permission to take Growlithe on my journey? Naruto asks Officer Jenny. It is not up to me, Officer Jen. Why says, it's up to Growlithe and his choice is pretty clear. Well then welcome to the team, Naruto says. It's about time we head off now, Naruto says. Goodbye, Officer Jenny and Nurse Joy say as Ash, Pikachu, Hinata, Naruto, and Growlithe all head off to Viridian Forest. Nurse Joy heads back inside the Pokemon Center and Officer Jenny heads off to the police station. Shortly after they do this, Mew comes out from its hiding place on the roof and starts following the group. What became of Jessie, James and Meowth? Will Naruto ever really fall in love with Hinata? Why is Mew following the group? The only way to find out is to keep reading. Thanks for reading. Please rate and review. P.S. In Naruto's world all that is happening is that Konoha and Akatsuki are trying to find Naruto the report in regularly to the IT leader, but they won't find anything and they won't know that until they search all of the lands, which can take a number of chapters with the time distortion, and I know you don't want to read the same thing over and over again. That is why I put it as a PS. I will write about anything new that happens when it happens, and that will only be when the time comes. We last left off with Team Rocket blasting off somewhere and Naruto and friends heading for Viridian Forest with Mew following them without them knowing it. Naruto and friends have now reached the outskirts of Viridian Forest. Since we are heading into a forest we should prepare for Pokemon appearing out of trees, Ash says. We'll keep that in mind, Naruto says, and all of them head into the forest. Somewhere in the NTO region Team Rocket finally crash lands and all of them come out of the crater they made. That was some attack, James said. What I want to know is how he was able to do that. Jessie says, GHT that people weren't able to use Pokemon attacks. They shouldn't be able, Meowth says, but somehow he was able to. I think we should report this to our leader, Giovanni, Jessie says. Unfortunately, why our only way to contact Giovanni is on the airship which is still in the air just outside of Viridian City, James says. That's horrible, especially since we don't know where we are to be able to get back to Viridian City, Jessie says. Meowth chuckles. It's a good thing I was smart enough to bring the remote to call the ship to us just in case something like this happened, and brings the remote out to show them. What are you waiting for then? Jessie and James say, go ahead and call the ship then. Be patient. I was about to that, Meowth says and presses the button. Okay, the ship's on its way. And a countdown appears on a tiny screen on the remote. It looks like it will take a couple of hours to get here. Well then, what should we do while we wait? James asks. I would probably start by turning your Pokemon back to their Pokeball, Meowth says. I knew that, James says and looks down embarrassingly. Return coughing, he says. Return Ekans, Jessie says. Now that that's taken care of I think I'll take a nap. I think I will as well, James says. Wake us up when the ship gets here, Meowth. Naruto and friends have been walking through Viridian Forest for a little bit now without seeing any Pokemon. All the while Mew has been following them. I wonder why there aren't any Pokemon out, Ash says. I have no clue, Naruto say, but don't you get the feeling that we're being watched? It feels more than we're just being watched, Hinata says. It feels like we're being followed. They walk for a few more steps and then turn around to see nothing there. Then they turn back around and continue walking. Just before they had turned around, Mew teleported to the trees along the path, and when they turned back around, Mew teleported to its original spot. As they continue walking, Mew starts flying closer. Unfortunately, Mew gets a little too close and Growlithe smells Mew. Growlithe says and starts growling. What is it, Growlithe? Naruto asks. Growlithe walks over to where Mew teleported from and starts barking. It looks like someone or something is trying to hide from us, Naruto says. Could you find him, Harriet, with your Byakugan, Hinata? Sure thing, Hinata says and makes a ND sign Byakugan, she says and takes a look around. It is fine, Hinata says, it's just Mew hiding over there and points to the trees where Mew is hiding. Come on out Mew, Naruto says and Mew comes flying out from where it was hiding. What are you doing following us? Naruto asks, is it because we saved you? Mew says and nods its head and then shakes its head. I think that Mew is saying at you are both correct and incorrect, Hinata says. What's the other reason that you're following us? Naruto asks. Hey, that's the Rasengan. How do you learn that? Naruto asks. It's very interesting. Gee, Hinata says, as you know, when I use my Byakugan I can see people's chakra network. Apparently Pokemon use something very similar to our chakra in order to use their attacks. I would guess that it means we might be able to teach our Pokemon some of our jutsu and possibly how to use different elemental attacks. Naruto says. It is very likely, Hinata says. From what I can figure, then you were watching our battle with Team Rocket to see if I would be able to protect you and you decided that I would be able to protect you no matter what. Is that correct? Naruto asks Mew. Mew says and nods its head. That's cool, Naruto says, but it's even cooler that you learned the Rasengan after seeing me use it just once. It's no wonder you're legendary. At this statement Mew looks a little embarrassed at all the praise. Mew, would you like to join our party? Naruto asks. Mew says and nods its head excitingly. Go ahead and get into this empty Pokeball then, Naruto says, you might as well get into one as well, growleth. Naruto grabs 2 empty Pokeballs, presses the buttons on both of them, and tosses a Pokeball at Mew and one at Growlithe. They both turn into energy and go into their own Pokeball. The Pokeballs just sit there until the buttons stop blinking. Naruto bends down and grabs both Pokeballs. Congrats on getting Mew to join you, Ash says. I wasn't trying to get Mew to join me. I just did what was the right thing to do, Naruto says. Either way, Mew is now yours, Ash says. Let's just drop the subject and continue through the forest, Naruto says. At that point they all hear a blood-curdling scream. Come on, let's go, Naruto say insistently, someone might be in trouble, and grabs Hinata and Ash's arm and pulls them in the direction of the scream. When they get to where the scream came from, they see a girl about Ash's age wearing a yellow shirt with blue coveralls and a yellow and blue backpack sitting against a tree trembling fearfully, and in front of her are 2 bug Pokemon. A Weedle and a Caterpie. Great, Naruto thinks. It was just someone scared, and says, hello, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. What is your name? My name is Misty, Misty says with a scar. Ed tremble in her voice. Why did you scream? Naruto asks. Bugs absolutely scare me, Misty screams. I absolutely hate them. They're ugly, slimy, and disgusting. It doesn't look like the Pokemon are going to leave Misty alone, Naruto says. The only thing we can do is catch them, but they're too close to Misty. I don't want to endanger her. Luckily bug Pokemon are really weak, Ash says. If we throw a Pokeball at them they should get caught. Okay, I'll leave that to you and Hinata, Naruto says to Ash. Alright then, Ash says. If you don't mind, could I catch Caterpie? Hinata asks Ash. Sure thing, Ash says. That means I'll catch Weedle then. Alright, let's do this then, Hinata says. Hinata and Ash turn and face the Pokemon. They both grab an empty Pokeball and press the button. Hinata throws hers at Caterpie and Ash throws his at Weedle. They both turn into energy and go into their Pokeball. The Pokeballs wiggle a little bit while the buttons are blinking. The buttons stop blinking and Shish and Hinata go over and pick up their Pokeball. After Ash picks up his Pokeball he heads over to Misty. Misty, you can go ahead and get up now, Ash says. Misty looks up at Ash and is frozen for a second and then gets up. Thank you so much for helping me out, Misty says energetically. It was no problem, Ash says. What were you doing out here if you hate bugs? He asks. I decided I would travel around and train to be the world's greatest water Pokemon trainer and decided to start at Viridian City, and the only way to get to Pewter City is to head through this forest, Misty says. We're on our why to Pewter City, since that's where the first gym leader is, in order to challenge him in order to win a gym badge, Ash says. If you want to come with us you can. I would sure like that, Misty says. Hold up a second here. Naruto says, you're saying that the first gym leader is in the next town. Next city actually, Ash says. Never mind that. Naruto says, the point is that the gym leader is in the next place that we will visit. That's correct, Ash says. And it won't take us all that long to get there, will it? Naruto asks. No, not really. Ash replies, if we go at this pace we should be there by nightfall. Do you really think that we are ready to fight a gym leader? Naruto asks. Now that you mention it, we aren't ready for a gym leader, Ash replies. Wouldn't it make more sense to stay in the forest and train? Naruto asks. It would, Ash replies. I think it would be best to split up into 2 groups and train together with your partner. Naruto says, I'll go with Hinata and you can go with Misty. That sounds fair, Ash says, that is if Misty is willing to come with me. Sure I will, Misty says eagerly. I wouldn't want to meet any more bug Pokemon without you there. We'll go ahead and head out then, Naruto says, and when we're done training Hinata will use her Pidgey to find you two and lead us to you. Hold on one second, Misty says, before you go I want to thank Hinata properly. Misty goes over to Hinata, grabs her arm, and starts leading her past some trees. I'll be right back, Misty says. I just want to give Hinata something in secret, so don't either of you dare follow us. When Misty has gone far enough away she lets go of Hinata's arm. What was all that about? Hinata asks. What I have to give you? I figured you wouldn't want the guys to see, at least not at first, Misty says. What do you mean by that? Hinata asks, slightly confused. Misty takes off her backpack and puts it on the ground and then opens it up. This is what I mean, Misty says and pulls out a purple D. Res and hands it to Hinata. I wanted to give you this. Hinata takes it out of Misty's hand and says, this is so beautiful, but why don't you wear this? My sisters made this for me before I left on my journey. But I hate girly clothes and thought that you might like it, Misty says, and based on your reaction it looks like I was correct. I love it, Hinata says, but are you sure I can have this? Quote, I already said that I was never going to wear this. It is perfectly alright, Misty says. Would you like to try it on now? She asks. Yes, I would love to, Hinata says. After a few minutes Hinata stands in front of Misty wearing a purple dress, specifically lavender shade, which is just long enough to cover the knees. Wow, that dress looks good on you, Misty says. It fits you perfectly in that shade. It really shows off your figure well and complements your face and hair. You don't think it shows too much of my figure? Hinata asks. It does show off all your curves if that's what you're asking, BU. I would figure that you would want to show off your figure for that Naruto fellow, Misty says. From what I can tell it looks like you two are a couple. Sort of, Hinata says. I really love Naruto, but hasn't really shown the same feelings for me. Guys are bad about showing how they truly feel, Misty says. I'm sure that Naruto has some feelings for you, he just doesn't know how to express his feelings. I sure hope that is true, Hinata says. Misty says with her left hand on her chin. What is it? Hinata asks. Something just looked wrong for the dress, as if something was missing, but I think I just figured it out, Misty says. What is missing? Hinata asks. It's not that something's missing, it's your hairstyle, Misty says. You're wearing your hair up, and for a dress you should have your hair brushed down. Luckily I have a brush in my backpack for such an occasion, and pulls out a hairbrush from the backpack. As Misty brushes Hinata's hair, Hinata asks, how do you think Naruto will react when he sees me like this? I don't know, Misty says, but I'm just about done brushing your hair. With Hinata's hair being brushed down it is about shoulder length. There, that looks so much better, Misty says. It's too bad I don't have a mirror in order for you to see yourself. I'm sure it looks perfectly fine, Hinata says. I think we had better head back to the boys. You're right, Misty says, and grabs Hinata's clothes that she had changed out of and puts them in her backpack. I'm sure that they're getting impatient. One thing before we go, Hinata says, where should I put my Pokédex and Pokeballs? She asks. There's a pocket on both the left and right side of the dress close to your knee. They blend in well enough that you won't be able to see them if you're not looking for them. Misty says. You can put your Pokédex in one pocket and your Pokeballs into another. Why don't I just wear the Pokeball belt? Hinata asks. The Pokeball belt just wouldn't look right with the dress, Misty says. How will I keep track of which Pokeballs are empty and which have Pokemon in them? Hinata asks. How about you put your empty Pokeballs in the pocket with your Pokédex and put the ones with Pokemon in them in the other pocket? Misty suggests. Well then how will I know which Pokemon I'm bringing out? Hinata asks. Misty hesitates for a second. I didn't think about that. We don't have anything to mark the Pokeballs and they're all in one pocket. I guess I could modify the dress to add more pockets to it so that it's similar to a Pokeball belt, but there's no time to do that now, Misty says to herself. What are you talking about? Hinata asks. Oh, it's nothing. Misty says. I was just figuring out how to solve that problem that you mentioned. There's nothing we can do right now, so we might as well head back to the boys. Let me just put away my Pokédex and Pokeballs before we head out, Hinata says. It takes Hinata a couple of minutes to find the pockets because the way the dress was designed, there's a spot on the dress before it flares out along the legs. There's a line that hides two small zippers, one on each side, and puts her Pokédex and Pokeballs in the right pocket and the Pokeballs with Pokemon in them in the left pocket, and start heading back to Naruto and Ash. Meanwhile, back at Naruto and Ash, Naruto is starting to get impatient. Right now he has his arms crossed and has started tapping his left foot. What's taking those girls so long? Naruto asks. Who knows? Ash replies. Girls tend to take a long time when they are together. You just need to be patient. Quote, it's not that I'm impatient, it's just that I don't like standing around doing nothing when I could be training, Naruto says. How about we have a Pokemon battle while we are waiting for them to show up, Ash says. You're on, Naruto says. Misty and Hinata arrive at the tree where on the other side Ash and Naruto are about to have a Pokemon battle. Now then, you wait here until I introduce you, Misty says. Is all this really necessary? Hinata asks. No, I guess not, Misty says, but it will be more fun to see Naruto's reaction after I introduce you. I too wonder about how Naruto will react when he sees me like this. Hinata says. That means we're doing this? Misty asks. Let's do it, Hinata replies. Misty comes out from behind the tree and sees Naruto and Ash getting ready for a Pokemon battle. What do you think you're doing? Misty asks. Oh, you're back, Naruto says. We were just about to have a Pokemon battle while waiting for you to show up. I'm so glad you could entertain yourselves, Ms. Tai says sarcastically. What's with the sarcasm? Naruto asks. I'm slightly upset that you couldn't wait 20 minutes for us to get back, Misty says. Really, it's only been 20 minutes, Naruto says. It felt more like hour to hour and a half had passed. Yeah, it's only been 20 minutes, Misty says. By the way, where is Hinata? Naruto asks. She's back behind the tree waiting for me to introduce her, Ms. Tai says. Since we spent most of the time improving her look, we wanted to make sure we had your full attention before she came out. Misty turns around and yells at Hinata. You can come on out now, Hinata. And Hinata steps out from behind the tree. As soon as Naruto sees Hinata, his jaw drops. Hinata, is that you? He stutters. In the flesh, Hinata says. What do you think? She asks, blushing slightly. I think that you're drop-dead gorgeous, Naruto replies. And speaking of which, good night, he says, and then passes out. Oh no, what have I done? Hinata asks, terrified, and runs over to where Naruto's unmoving body lays. Don't worry, Ash says, he'll be just fine. He just passed out, that's all. Hinata kneels before Naruto and starts shaking him. Come on and wake up, Naruto, she says. Naruto starts waking up. Still groggy, he says, am I dead because I see an angel in front of me? And then he becomes fully awake and says, oh Hinata, it's you, what happened? He asks. That's what I was going to ask. Hinata says, you had me so worried, and hugs him tightly, and Naruto passes out again. Wake up, Hinata says, and starts shaking him like a rag doll. Naruto suddenly wakes up and says, I did it again, didn't I? Yes you did, Hinata says, now don't do it again. You already had me worried the first 2 times, why would you even faint? Hinata asks. I guess I must have been in shock from seeing your immense beauty. Naruto says. Come on now Naruto. Hinata says. No matter how beautiful I am you shouldn't have passed out. It just makes no sense. There must be something wrong with you. Not quite. A voice says in Naruto's head. Is that you Kyuubi? Naruto asks in thought form. Who else could it be? Kyuubi replies. I don't know. Naruto thinks. I could be going crazy. Well you're not. Kyuubi thinks. I thought that you would be out of commission for a while. Naruto thinks says. I was supposed to be but something happened and now I have enough energy to be able to communicate with you. Kyuubi thinks says. Do you know what happened? Naruto think asks. There was a sudden surge of chakra within both you and me. Kyuubi think replies. It was so sudden that a bit of my chakra leaked from me in. To you and your body couldn't handle it which caused you to pass out. Kyuubi think says. Do you have any clue why that happened? Naruto think asks. My guess would be because of what you felt when you saw Hinata dressed like that. Kyuubi think replies. Thanks. Naruto thinks says. I'll let Hinata know so that she doesn't continue to worry. Good luck. Kyuubi thinks says. Good news Hinata. Naruto says. What is it? Hinata asks. I'm perfectly alright. Naruto replies. Apparently I passed out from an overload of chakra. How could that happen? Hinata asks. This is how it happened based on what Kyuubi could figure. Naruto says. When I saw you dressed like that I felt something that apparently I can't explain but I reacted by creating a lot of chakra within both the Kyuubi and I and since it caught the Kyuubi off guard the chakra leaked from him to me so that there was enough chakra to overload my body and knock me out. That's a relief. Hinata says and hugs Naruto again and Naruto passes out again. He wakes up soon afterward and says, I would suggest not hugging me like that for a little bit. It seems to be the main source of my emotion. I'll try to restrain myself, Hinata says. Anata helps Naruto and to Ash she says, Naruto's alright. We'll go ahead and head out now, and starts walking next to Naruto in a direction. When Hinata and Naruto are out of sight and earshot Ash too RNs around to face Misty and says, you planned this didn't you? I didn't plan for Naruto's passing out, Misty says, but my plan for them to grow as a couple did work. Even if it was only by letting Naruto know that he has intense feelings for Hinata. I wish I knew how you had time to plan all of this, Ash says. Let's just say that I've been watching you from the very beginning. Misty says, you're not going to say any more are you? Ash asks. Nope, Misty replies. They start walking off in the opposite direction and as walking Misty thinks, there's one other thing that I didn't plan for. I didn't plan on having feelings for Ash. Naruto and Hinata walk until they find a lake and start training near the shore of the lake and Ash and Misty walk until they find a clearing and start training. Back at the area where Team Rocket as their ship finally appears overhead. Meowth walks over to both Jessie and James and shakes them to try and get up. Come on, Meowth says, the ship's here and it's time for you two to get up. Jessie and James finally wake up and yawn. How long were we asleep for? They ask. A couple of hours, Meowth says, exactly as long as I said it would take for the ship to get here. Jessie and James walk right over and stand beside Meowth. Go ahead and call our transport to the ship Meowth, James says. Here we go, Meowth says and pushes another button on the remote. On the bottom of the ship a circular compartment opens up and a set of rings come down surrounding Jessie, James, and Meowth and transports them up to the ship. When they get onto the ship James automatically goes over to one of the keyboards and types in something and Giovanni appears on the screen. What took you so long? Giovanni yells. I've been waiting for hours for you to check in. Something unexpected happened, Jessie says. At the very least did you capture Mew? Giovanni asks. No, by the time we got there Mew was already healed and had left. James says. You are so incompetent I am going to be assigning another team to this mission, Giovanni says. Hold on 1 second, Meowth says, this was not our fault. We even knew that you would be upset so we tried to steal some Pokemon for you. Oh, really? That's a different matter then, Giovanni says, what Pokemon did you steal for me? He asks. None, James says, we were badly defeated and lost the Growlithe that we had caught. It seems That all you are giving me? Giovanni says. If you can't give me any good news, I am sticking to what I originally said. One piece of good news is that the mind control device works, but the design is a little too large since it was easily taken off of the Growlithe. Jesse says. That's not good enough to make me change my mind. Giovanni says. You'll have to give me better news than that. We don't have any better news, Meowth says, but we do have some interesting news. Okay, I'll bite, Giovanni says. What is the interesting news? He asks. We saw a person using Pokemon attacks, Meowth says. Why? Oh, we're right, that is very interesting news, Giovanni says. If it is true, why would we lie to you? James asks innocently. In order to try to stay on the mission, Giovanni says, but it didn't work. You're still off the mission. What? Why? Jesse asks. I am giving you a more important mission, Giovanni says. Since you three are the only one to see this person, I am giving you the mission of tracking down this person and bringing him her in so that we can study him her. But be warned, if you were lying to me, you shall no longer be a part of Team Rocket, and the screen cuts off. You heard Giovanni. Let's find that boy, James says. What is our current position? He asks. Just outside of Cerulean City, Meowth says. Considering they were in Viridian City, they are probably in Viridian Forest training, Jesse says. You heard her, James says. Set course for Viridian Forest. Right, Meowth says. Course set for Viridian Forest. How long will it take until we get to Viridian Forest? James asks. About a day, Meowth replies. Good, James says. That gives us plenty of time to come up with a strategy. Meowth sets the ship on autopilot and all three head into the next room to come up with a strategy for capturing Naruto. Will Team Rocket ever capture Naruto? Will Naruto ever understand what it is that he is feeling? Will Misty ever reveal in detail how she set the plan? Will Ash ever realize that Misty has feelings for him? Keep reading to find out. When we last left off, Naruto and Hinata went off to train together, and Ash and Misty went off to train together. Throughout the day, Naruto has been trying to teach his Pokemon some of the jutsu that he knows, and Hinata has been training Chansey to use its energy in its strikes to increase the damage it does, as well as teaching Caterpie and Pidgey to put energy into different parts of their body to do different things. Misty and Ash have done their own drawing by having repeated Pokemon battle against each other, as well as catching some wild Pokemon when they show up. By the end of the day, Ash has caught a Spearow and his Weedle has evolved into Kakuna. Hinata's Caterpie has evolved into a Metapod. Naruto has had very little luck even teaching Growlithe the Shadow Clone Jutsu. The sun falls on our groups and they start setting up camp and get ready to head off to bed. Ash and Misty just set up the beds and go off to sleep to prepare for training tomorrow. Hinata starts to lay out the bedding for her and Naruto to head off to bed. She looks over at Naruto and has worried look on her face. Naruto is sitting over by the lake and has a slightly depressed look on his face. Hinata walks over to Naruto. What's the matter, Naruto? Hinata asks. As you know, I've been trying to teach the jutsu that I know to my Pokemon, and yet I haven't had any luck at all, Naruto says. You need to remember that the energy the Pokemon use is only similar to our chakra. Hinata says. The way they use it is different than how we use it. From what I've seen with training my Pokemon, they can focus their energy into a specific point, but when it comes to putting it out of their body, it becomes difficult. You're right, Naruto says confidently. If we keep it, they'll get it eventually. I just need to stop training them as if they were me and start training them like they are. Do you feel better now? Hinata asks. Much better, thank you, Naruto says. How about you come to bed then? Hinata says. In a little bit, Naruto says. I still have some things I need to figure out. You're going to talk to the Kyuubi again, aren't you? Hinata asks. He's the only one that I think can even possibly answer my questions, Naruto says. Well, I'll be right over there when you're finished, Hinata says and walks over to where she set up the beds. Kyuubi, you there? Naruto thinks. Since I am a part of you, I am always here, Kyuubi thinks says. Whether or not I'll be able to speak to you is a different matter. It sounds you are able to speak to me perfectly. Fine, Naruto thinks. It's a good thing too, because I have some questions I want to ask you. Before you ask your questions, would it be alright if we had this conversation in your dreamscape? Hugh. Think asks. I feel much better talking there. Sorry Kyuubi. Naruto thinks. I would rather stay here and look at the night sky and feel the breeze, and besides I would rather be able to protect Hina. In case she falls asleep and someone tries to attack us. Have it your way then. Kyuubi says, what was your question? He asks. I still have some questions about what happened earlier today. Naruto thinks. With the whole passing out thing. Kyuubi asks. Yeah, that's right. Naruto thinks. You said that an emotion caused me to pass out and I thought about it, but I still don't know what you mean. Man, it's no wonder they call you the #1 knucklehead. Ninja. Kyuubi says. You are even completely oblivious to your own emotions. What are you talking about? Naruto asks. I knew the reason why you were passing out, but I didn't tell you because I was hoping that you would figure it out without me telling you, but I see now that there's no other way, Kyuubi says. What do you mean? Naruto asks. You know how the madder you get the more my chakra leaks from me and surrounds you, Kyuubi says. Yeah, but what does that have to do with what happened today? Naruto asks. There's an emotion even more powerful than anger and therefore more of my chakra leaked into you, Kyuubi says, enough all at once that it caused you to pass out. What emotion is that? Naruto asks. Love, Kyuubi replies. What are you trying to say? Naruto asks. I guess I'll just have to say it outright, Kyuubi says, let's put this simply. You love Hinata. I love Hinata. Naruto shocked. But that's impossible, and anyways how do you know what I feel towards somebody? He asks. I am a fox spirit, which means I know NGS that most people are oblivious to, and since I am inside you I know you better than you know yourself. Really? Naruto thinks. If that is true, then show me proof that I had any feelings for Hinata before now. Remember the day of the main matches of the Chunin exam? Kyuubi asks. Yeah. Naruto thinks. So. You went to the training ground where you became a genin and Hinata was there, Kyuubi says. You were feeling depressed because you thought that you couldn't beat Neji, and Hinata happened to be there and gave you the greatest speech ever, which cheered you, and as you were walking away you said, I like people like you. You outright admitted that you liked Hinata. Yeah, as a friend. Naruto thinks. You know that's not true. You said it with such truth and passion that it can only be more than friendship, Kyuubi says. Whatever. Naruto thinks. You're crazy. No. Kyuubi says. You're just in denial. I'm tired of talking to you, Naruto thinks. Until you you're feeling, then you'll keep fainting. Whenever Hinata does something passionate for you, Kyuubi says, just think about what I said and you'll see that what I said is true. Good night Kyuubi, Naruto thinks. Good night. Kyuubi says, and I wish you luck. With what? Naruto asks. With accepting your true feelings for Hinata, Kyuubi replies. I already told you we're just friends, Naruto thinks. Sure. Kyuubi says with a mental smirk. Good night. Naruto thinks and cuts off communications with Kyuubi. Naruto gets up and walks over to where Hinata set up the beds, and all the while grumbling to himself. Darn Kyuubi trying to tell me what I feel. Who does he think he is? When Naruto reaches the bed he sees that Hinata already fell asleep under her blanket. I guess she was really tired, Naruto thinks. Naruto gets under his blanket and tries to fall asleep, but he has trouble falling asleep because his conversation with the Kyuubi keeps replaying in his head. And even when he does fall asleep he rolls around constantly as if having a bad dream, and then he rolls over and bumps into Hinata and puts his arm around her and finally relaxes. They both sleep soundly, Naruto hugging Hinata. Back on Team Rocket's ship, Jesse, James, and Meowth finish up their meeting. Do we all understand the plan? James asks. Yep, Jesse and Meowth replies. That's good, yeah, Mies says. Now when will we arrive at Viridian Forest? He asks. Unfortunately we will arrive at about lunchtime tomorrow, Meowth says. What are you talking about? James asks rhetorically. It is quite fortunate. It gives us plenty of time to find that boy and then to set up our plan. He says, meanwhile put up the cloaking shield. We don't want him to know we're there. The hull of the airship starts to shimmer and then disappears. Cloaking shield up, Jesse says. Good, then let's get some sleep. We'll need to be well rested to execute this plan, James says. Right you are, Jesse says. Good night, Meowth says. Jesse, James, and Meowth each head into their own room on the ship, jump into bed, and fall off into dreamland. What is Team Rocket's plan? Will Naruto ever admit his true feelings to either himself or Hinata? Keep reading to find out, and I would politely request for whomever is reading this to review the story saying what you like about it or what things need to be changed or fixed. Speak, Mew telepathically talking or private thinking with one person depends on the situation. Speak, Abra telepathically talking or private thinking with one person depends on the situation. Calm. Eon, I did need to distinguish between Abra and Mew somehow. If you're confused about this, just read and find out. Chapter 7. The sun rises on our characters. Ash and Misty wake up and continue training. Hinata starts waking up and notices that Naruto is hugging her and is still asleep. This is nice, Hinata thinks. I would like to stay like this a little bit longer, but I think it would be better to wake him up now. Hinata starts shaking Naruto and says, "Come on Naruto, it's time to wake up." Naruto starts waking up and drowsily asks, "Hinata, where are we and what am I doing?" Hinata replies, "What you are doing is hugging me, and you obviously must not be fully awake if you forgot where we are." Naruto, now fully awake, says, "Of course I remember where we are, but why am I hugging you?" "Don't you know?" Hinata asks. "You're the one who did it." "I must have done it in my sleep because I didn't hug you before I fell asleep," Naruto replies. "Well, perhaps your subconscious is trying to say something," Hinata says. "What would my subconscious be trying to tell me?" Naruto asks while thinking. "Kyuubi, did you do this?" "You know I can't control your body," Kyuubi replies. "I think you know exactly what your subconscious is trying to tell you," Hinata says while thinking. "Take your time Naruto, I can wait. If what you're trying to insinuate is that I have romantic feelings for you, then you can quit thinking that because I don't," Naruto says while thinking. "Kyuubi is right, I do love Hinata, but I can't admit that to her. We are too young to be having a romantic relationship. That hasn't stopped her from trying to have a romantic relationship with you," Kyuubi says. "Hey, I didn't say you could listen to my thoughts," Naruto thinks. "Any thoughts that you don't want me to hear you had better block my connection to you," Kyuubi says. Naruto forcefully blocks the connection between him and the Kyuubi without bothering to answer back. "Well, are you ready to get back to training?" Naruto asks. "First of all, you need to stop hugging me and let me up," Hinata says. Naruto frantically takes his hands off of Hinata and puts his hand behind his head, rubbing it as he does when he's really embarrassed, and says, "Sorry about that." Hinata replies, "There's nothing to be sorry about, I quite enjoyed it," and blushes slightly. Naruto and Hinata don't say anything for about a minute, and then Naruto says, "I am going to starting training with the basics for chakra control. Hopefully if they can learn that, we can go on to more complicated stuff." "Good luck with that," Hinata says. "I am going to be training my Metapod so that hopefully it will evolve into something else as well as train Pidgey and Chansey." Naruto grabs his 3 Pokeballs, presses their buttons, and throws them, saying, "Come on out Abra, Growlithe, and Mew," and all 3 come out in a flash of light. "We are getting down to basics. Growlithe, I want you to use the energy inside of you and put it into your paws and use it to walk up the tree," Naruto says. "Here, let me show you," and makes a hand sign putting chakra into his feet and walks up the tree easily. "They're just like that." "Growl," Growlithe says and tilts its head in a questioning look. Naruto opens back up his connection to the Kyuubi. "Could I get a little help here?" he asks. "Aura," Kyuubi says. "What?" Naruto confused. "The energy within a Pokemon is called aura," Kyuubi says. "I don't even want to know how you know that," Naruto thinks. "Scratch that, I do want to know how you know that," Naruto changing his mind. "That would be because of me," a new voice chimes in. "He knows it because I know it." "Who is this?" Naruto thinks. "Come on, don't you know?" the voice asks. "I haven't told him yet," Kyuubi says. "Told me what?" Naruto thinks. "Let me handle this," the voice thinks. "Go ahead," Kyuubi replies. I am your Mew, the voice says. I am speaking to you telepathically. I didn't know that you could speak telepathically, Naruto thinks. Yeah, all psychic Pokemon have this ability, Mew thinks. Then why doesn't Abra talk like this? Naruto thinks. Abra doesn't have much to say, Mew thinks. That makes sense, Naruto thinks in. How then could you both be quiet for a little bit? It's hard enough having one creature talk to me in my head, but two is overdoing it a little bit. Sure thing, Mew thinks and breaks the telepathic link to Naruto. Now then, let's try this again. Naruto says, Growlithe, I want you to put your aura into your paws and use it to climb this tree. Growl, Growlithe says and closes its eyes for a second. ND then starts to run for the tree, but as it starts to try to run up the tree, it falls back and lands on its back. Don't worry, Naruto says, I had the same problem when trying to master this step. Hi, Nat stops watching this and then decides to get to work. She grabs her Pokeballs and releases her Pidgey, Metapod, and Chansey and says, what we shall be doing is something tricky. I am going to have all of you battle it out in a three-way Pokemon battle. You need to be aware of two opponents instead of just one. All three of the Pokemon have a confused look on their face. It's simple. All-Star. TU out Chansey, you use Tackle on Metapod, Hinata says, and Chansey starts running at Metapod. Now Pidgey swoop in with quick attack and intercept Chansey, Hinata says, and Pidgey starts flying at Chansey. Now Chansey dodge Pidgey and Metapod jump at Pidgey and use Tackle, Hinata says, and Chansey ducks out of the way of Pidgey's quick attack, and Metapod uses the chance to jump onto Chansey and uses Chansey as a springboard to jump at Pidgey. Seeing this and not waiting for an order, Pidgey banks hard right to dodge Metapod and then comes back around for a second shot. Good, it looks like yo. You now know what I mean, therefore you keep doing that while I go train for a little bit, Hinata says and walks behind a tree to start training in secret. Naruto sees this and thinks, I wonder what Hinata is doing. Unfortunately Growlithe needs me here to talk it through its training, and says, careful, you're using too much aura now, as Growlithe falls off from breaking the tree bark. As Hinata's Pokemon are battling each other and dodging each other in what looks like a dance, Hinata starts her training. If Naruto could only see me now, I think he would be shocked, Hinata thinks. I've seen the C concept behind this jutsu, and with my excellent chakra control I should be able to master this jutsu easily, and puts her hands out and there's chakra starting to swirl in her hand. It's too flat, she thinks. I need to figure out how to make it more spherical. A few hours go by and it becomes lunchtime. Naruto grabs the food he has gathered for lunch and sets it out for everyone. Lunch is ready, Naruto yells out. Growlithe stops training and heads on over to Naruto. Hinata's Pokemon quit battling each other and come on over. Hinata comes on out from where she was training with an exhausted look on her face. Then they all start eating. So, Naruto says, Hinata, what were you doing back there that got you so exhausted? He asks. I was working on mastering a new jutsu, Hinata replies. Why would you need to do that? Naruto asks. With the current jutsu that I have, there's nothing to be able to destroy any machines that we face, and therefore I need a jutsu with enough destructive force to be able to destroy a machine, Hinata replies. Anyway, how is your training with Growlithe coming? Hinata asks. It's coming along well, Naruto replies. Growlithe has nearly mastered the tree climbing exercise. But that's just step 1. Next I'll be training Growlithe to maintain it under battle situations by having both Mew and Abra teleport where Growlithe is and try to teleport Growlithe off the tree. Growl, Growlithe says, whining, and covers its head with its paws. It doesn't look like Growlithe wants to do more training right now, Hinata says and adds curiously, Mew knows teleport. Yeah, I looked it up on the Pokédex and Mew knows teleport and pound, Naruto says, along with the Rasengan, but that is a move that didn't originate in this world and therefore the Pokédex wouldn't know that. And rubs Growlithe's head saying, don't worry Growlithe, you're tired and need a good rest. We'll continue training later today. Chansey, Pidgey, and Metapod also need a good rest, Hinta says, after all they were battling non-stop for a couple of hours. Looks like you could use a good rest too, Naruto says to Hinata. How about we all take a nap after we finish eating, he suggests. That's a perfect idea, Hinata says enthusiastically. After all, it is a perfectly sunny day where the temperature's not too hot and not too cold. After Naruto, Hinata, and all their Pokemon finish eating up, they lay down underneath the tree by the lake where they were last night and take a well-deserved rest. Over with Ash and Misty, they start preparing lunch as well. A person hides in the bushes close by watching them, and as the finish making lunch he jumps out if the bush is screaming. This person is a boy who looks like he is dressed in a samurai suit. "Who are you?" Ash asks. "My name is Samurai and I am looking for a person from Pallet Town," he says. "That would be me," Ash says. "Then I challenge you to a Pokemon battle," Samurai says. "Could we do this after lunch?" Ash asks. "After all, I can't battle on an empty stomach." "No, we can't," Samurai says. "I have spent a bit of time trying to find you and we are going to have a Pokemon battle now," he adds with throwing a little bit of a tantrum. "We've got plenty of food," Misty says. "How about you join us for lunch and have your Pokemon battle afterward?" She asks. "No thank you," Samurai says. "I'm not hungry," and then his stomach growls. Misty and Ash both start laughing and Ash says, "It looks like your stomach has different ideas." "All right, it's true that I'm hungry," Samurai says, "and since you did offer me lunch I might as well accept, but don't think that means I'll go easy on you in our Pokemon battle." "I wouldn't expect you to," Ash says, and all three of them sit down and start eating along with Ash's Pokemon. Team Rocket arrives at Viridian City and prepare to search for Naruto. Meowth activate the life signs detector and look for human life signs. James say, "Yes sir," Meowth says and turns on a screen and dots of different colors show up on it. "What does it look like?" Jesse asks. "It looks like there are two groups of human life signs," Meowth says. "One group has 3 people and the other group has 2. We'll head for the group with 3 people," James says. "Set course Meowth." "Yes sir," Meowth says and sets course to where they think Naruto is. Ash, Misty, and Samurai finish eating lunch. Ash gets up and says, "We can have that Pokemon battle now if you want." "Of course I want this Pokemon battle," Samurai says. "I battled every other trainer from Pallet Town and this is my last chance to redeem myself." "Okay then," Ash says. "How many Pokemon will we use?" He asks. "We shall use 2 Pokemon apiece," Samurai says. "Okay then," Ash says. "Mind if I go first?" He asks. "Go ahead," Samurai says. "Go Spearow," Ash says, and Spearow takes flight from where it was perching. "Then I choose Pinsir," Samurai says and throws a Pokeball and a Pinsir appears in a flash of white light. "Let's start this," Ash says. "Yes let's," Samurai says. Spearow. "Fly up and dive bomb Pinsir while using Peck," Ash says, and Spearow gets some height and then starts diving at Pinsir, its beak glowing. "Wait for my signal to attack Spearow, Pinsir," Samurai says. "Now." Spearow use quick attack, Ash says, and Spearow opens its wings and faps them as it brings them back close to its body, allowing itself to gain more speed, hitting Pinsir before Pinsir has time to react. And flies off, putting some distance between the two of them. Now Spearow come back around and use wing attack, Ash says, and Spearow comes back around, its wings glowing, and heads straight at Pinsir. "Quick Pinsir," Samurai says. Tackle that Spearow before it can gather speed, and Pinsir starts charging at Spearow. Spearow dodge to the left and cut back to the right and strike, Ash says, and Spearow just misses getting hit by Pinsir and cuts back and hits Pinsir on the side. "Let's finish this," Ash says. Spearow start flying around Pinsir and use Gust, and Spearow flies around Pinsir and stops at points to use Gust, starting to cause a circular force of wind. "What are you trying to do?" Samurai asks. "All you're doing is making a wind barrier," Samurai says. Pinsir tackle that Spearow when it comes back around. Spearow comes back around just before Spearow gets in front of Pinsir. Pinsir starts charging, and as soon as Pinsir reaches the wind barrier, Pinsir slows down from being knocked slightly off balance by the wind. Now Spearow fly in and use Peck to finish it, and Spearow flies in and hits Pinsir with its glowing beak. Pinsir hits the ground with its eyes spinning. Frustrated I says. Pinsir return, and them familiar look of a Pokemon returning to its Pokeball happens. "You may have beaten Pinsir," Samurai says, "but you won't be able to beat my next Pokemon." Pokeball Go, N. DA Metapod appears in the way that Pokemon appear coming from its Pokeball. Metapod should be easy to take down, Ash thinks, but Samurai is so confident that I won't beat him that I should finish is quickly, and says, Spearow, let's finish this quickly. Dive and use Peck, and Spearow dives towards Metapod, its beak glowing. I thought you would do that, Samurai says, and just before Spearow hits Metapod he says, now harden and jump and use Tackle. Metapod glows for a second and then jumps and hits Spearow. Spearow falls to the ground, its eyes spinning. Good job, Spearow. Now return, Ash says, and Spearow returns to its Pokeball. Which Pokemon will you use now? Samurai asks tauntingly. Using Kakuna would be pointless because our Pokemon would hit each other doing little damage to each other. Ash thinks. That only leaves one choice. Pikachu, go, he says, and Pikachu jumps in front of Ash. Team Rocket arrives above Ash's group, invisible to them because of the stealth cloak around their ship. That's not the kid, what's his name? James says, I believe the girl called him Naruto. Jesse says, where is that Naruto kid? James asks. They must have split up and is in the other group, Jesse s. Ays, Meowth, head to the other group, James says. Yes sir, Meowth says, puts in the coordinates, and the ship head towards Naruto and Hinata, who are still asleep under the tree. Can't get too close to Metapod, Ash thinks. Pikachu start out with Thundershock, and Pikachu releases a bolt of electricity at Metapod. Metad jump to avoid it, Samurai says. Metapod jumps and the Thundershock attack goes underneath. Quick, Pikachu use Thundershock while Metapod is in the air, Ash says, and Pikachu fires another Thundershock at Metapod. Metapod counter with Harden, Samurai says. Metapod glows, and when Thundershock hits, most of it surround Metapod without affecting it. As you can see, attacking long range is useless, and if you try to get in close, Metapod will attack you with its hardened tackle and finish you off. Samurai says, just give up, you know that you can't win. Ash clenches his teeth thinking, he may be right, but I won't know until it happens, and yells at Samurai, I will never give up. My friends, the Pokemon will never trust me if I give up too easily. Pikachu, get ready, we are going to have one shot at this, he says. Pikachu says with a determined look on its face, and sparks come from its red cheeks. I like your fighting spirit, Samurai says, let's see what you've got. Here I go, Ash says, Pikachu close in quickly with quick attack, and Pikachu moves so fast that it is in front of Metapod before it has any time to do anything. Now put all your energy into one giant Thunderbolt, Ash says. Pikachu says as a giant bolt of electricity comes out of Pikachu and fires into the air, hawking everything within its area, which in this case includes both Pikachu and Metapod. A giant dust cloud is kicked up, and neither Ash nor Samurai can see what the result was. A few seconds later the dust clears and Pikachu is sitting on the ground exhausted, and Metapod lies on the ground knocked out with its eyes spinning. What happened? How did I lose? Samurai asks. I took a chance that Metapod's Harden didn't create a perfect defense and therefore had Pikachu get close and out all of its remaining energy into one attack, and it looks like it worked, Ash replies. Darn you, Ash, Samurai says, now I can't redeem myself from all the loses from the trainers from Pallet Town. That's not exactly true, Ash says, there are two more that started their journey from Pallet Town and are here in the forest somewhere. Thanks for that, Samurai says. Return Metapod, and Metapod returns to its Pokeball. First thing first, I need to head to the Pokemon Center and heal up my Pokemon before I face them, and heads out. Are you sure this is a good idea? Misty asks. Naruto and Hinata can handle themselves, Ash replies, besides it will teach them how official Pokemon battles work and will help to train their Pokemon. Back with Naruto and Hinata, they are still asleep as Team Rocket's airship arrives above them. There's that Naruto kid, James exclaims, and what luck, all of them are fast asleep. What shall we do? Jesse asks. We forget our original plan, James says. Meowth, hook up the airship's giant vacuum to the energy-absorbing cage and set up the teleporting blocking system. Yes sir, Meowth says and starts putting everything together. About 5 minutes later Meowth says, everything is set up, James. Alright, Jesse, activate the airship's giant vacuum and suck them all up, James says. As good as done, Jesse says and presses a button. On the outside of the airship a compartment opens up and a giant hose comes out and heads straight for Naruto and Hinata, and when it reaches them it sucks them and their Pokemon up so quick that they don't have time to wake up and drops them all into a cage, and all of them start to wake up from the jolt. All of them besides Abra, that is. Where are we? Naruto asks as he gets up and helps Hinata up. I can answer that for you, James says. You are in our airship and are our prisoners. Not for long, Naruto says. Mew, teleport us all out of here. Mew sets up for a teleport and nothing happens. Why isn't anything happening? Naruto asks. I don't know, Mew thinks. We set up a device around your cage so that you wouldn't teleport away, James says. We knew you had Abra, but to also catch Mew with you is doubly excellent. I shall still break us out of here, Naruto says and makes a shadow clone and forms the Rasengan. Let's see how your cage holds up to my Rasengan, Naruto says as he hits the cage wall, but the Rasengan just gets smaller and doesn't even leave a dent in the wall. What happened now? Naruto asks. I forgot to mention that you are in an energy-absorbing cage, James says. If you attack any part of the cage with any sort of energy besides physical energy, it will just absorb it, and it's from extremely tough materials, which means you can't possibly break out with physical. Now be quiet while we take you to our boss. I won't give up, Naruto thinks to himself and to both Kyuubi and Mew. He thinks, do you have any ideas for getting us out of here? If we put enough energy into the cage it should be unable to handle it and break apart, Kyuubi thinks. Unfortunately I don't think if you used your shadow clones with Rasengans and even Mew using the Rasengan, it won't be enough. What about if Naruto uses the clones with the Rasengans, I use clones with Rangans, and Abra uses clones with Rasengans? Mew thinks. That might work, Kyuubi thinks, but how is that possible? Abra and I are psychic-type Pokemon and are therefore more adept to learning moves, Mew thinks. We are limited by the type of move. We can learn any attack requiring specific energy usage other than physical energy just by watching it being used. Since your attack don't rely on any specific energy, it makes it easy to learn. If you can wake up Abra, then we'll try it, Naruto thinks. Hey Abra, time to wake up, Mew thinks forcefully. What's going on? Abra thinks. We need you to watch me and copy what I do, Naruto thinks and makes two shadow clones whom form a Rasengan and then both disappear. Can you do that? Naruto thinks. Mew and Abra then both make a shadow clone and both the single shadow W clones form a Rasengan without needing a second one. Do you think you have enough energy to make enough to line the walls? Naruto thinks. It depends on what you mean, Mew thinks. I want a 3-layer attack. I stand on the bottom. Mew floats above me, Abra sits on Mew's head, and we all attack at the same time. Naruto thinks. I should be able to, Mew thinks. I should as well, Abra thinks. I'll let Hinata know, Naruto thinks. Hinata, I would suggest you return all your Pokemon, Naruto says. Why? Hinata asks. Mew, Abra, and I plan to overload this and break us out of here. Naruto replies. Okay then, Hinata says. Pidgey, Chansey, and Metapod return, and all three return to their Pokeballs. Let's do this, Naruto says, and then there are 16 Narutos, Mews, and Abras along the walls, all with a Rasengan in their hand. Wait for my signal, Naruto says. 3, 2, 1, hit now, and all of them strike at once. The Rasengans get smaller and the shadow clones start disappearing as the energy gets absorbed, and then as the final shadow clones disappears and the last of the Rasengan disappears, alarms start blaring. Darn it, we were so close, Naruto says. Just a little more and we would have broken out. You're using 2 Rasengans, one in each hand. How'd you do that? Naruto asks. No time right now, Hinata says and hits the wall with both of them busting it open. Let's get out of here, she says. Hinata, Naruto, and Growlithe run out of there while Mew flies with Abra still on its head. A few minutes later they run into a dead end. Mew, can you teleport us out of here now? Naruto asks. With A's help we should have just enough energy to teleport all of us, Mew thinks, but we can only teleport to somewhere we've been before. Both of you teleport all of us to the Viridian City Pokemon Center. Naruto says, and they all disappear from Team Rocket's airship and appear above the floor of the Viridian City Pokemon Center's lobby and crash into the floor. Nurse Joy hears this and comes into the lobby asking, "What happened?" Naruto replies, "We just escaped from Team Rocket. Perhaps you had better tell me what happened in detail," Nurse Joy says. Naruto sits on the floor along with Hinata, Nurse Joy, Mew, Abra, and Growlithe and explains in detail about what happened after they left. "Wow," Nurse Joy says, "a lot happened since you left here yesterday." "You can most definitely say that, Nar." Yuto says, "One thing still doesn't make sense." "What's that?" Nurse Joy asks. "How were you able to use 2 Rasengans at one time, Hinata?" Naruto asks, "I was using my Byakugan when you used the Rasengan against Team Rocket and therefore saw the basics about how the jutsu worked and figuring that we might get in more trouble with Team Rocket since we have Mew traveling with us and for some reason or other you might not be able to do anything and none of my Pokemon might not be able to do anything. I knew that I would need a jutsu that would be strong enough to protect everyone and the first one that came to mind was the Rasengan. I then started out by mastering doing it in one hand and then took it a step further and mastered it using both hands," Hinata explains. "Still, how were you able to master it so quickly?" Naruto asks. "That's because I have perfect control of my chakra," Hinata replies. "Since that was explained, I should get to the real point of why we're here," Naruto says. "What's that?" Nurse Joy asks. "Our Pokemon used up a lot of energy and I was hoping that you could heal them," Naruto says. "Sure thing," Nurse Joy says, "just return them to their Pokeballs and give the Pokeballs to me." "Okay then," Naruto says. Growlithe, Abra, Mew return, and all 3 return to their Pokeballs. "Here you go," Naruto says as he hands the Pokeballs to Nurse Joy. "And here are mine," Hinata says as she hands hers to Nurse Joy. "All right, this will take a few minutes," Nurse Joy says. "What do we do until then?" Hinata asks. "I guess we wait," Naruto says. Naruto starts thinking to himself, that was SWEET of Hinata learning a jutsu to help protect me. "That's all you can think." Kyuubi thinks annoyed. "What else should I think?" Naruto thinks. "You should be thinking of a way to admit to Hinata that you love her." Mew thinks. "I already decided that I wasn't going to tell Hinata until we were older." Naruto thinks. "Anyway, how can you communicate when you are in your Pokeball?" "Just because I'm in my Pokeball doesn't mean I can't communicate telepathically," Mew thinks. "You really should tell her." Abra thinks. "I'm certain she suspects you love her and would like to know ASAP whether or not you love her." Getting extremely upset and not realizing it, Naruto yells out loud, "Would you 3 stop ganging up on me? I already decided that I wouldn't admit to Hinata that I love her and that's final." Naruto hears a little sniffling and turns to see Hinata crying. "Why would you do that to me?" She asks. "Did you hear what I just said?" Naruto asks with it just starting to sink in. "Yes, I did," Hinata replies, "and I want to know that if you love me, why you wouldn't admit it to me." "I was thinking that we are too young to be loving each other," Naruto says. "Naruto, you idiot," Hinata says and slaps Naruto across the face. "Love has no restrictions on age. If you love someone, then you should tell them." As Naruto rubs the spot where Hinata hit him, he hears, "Is it true?" "What was that?" he asks. "I didn't quite hear you." "Is it true that you really love me?" Hinata asks. "Of course it's true," Naruto replies. "I thought that you wouldn't hear me when I made that statement, so of course it's true." "Oh Naruto," Hinata says, extremely happy, and gives Naruto so big a hug that Naruto is having trouble breathing. "Hinata," Naruto wheezes, "could you loosen up your grip? I'm having trouble breathing." Naruto, not passed out," Hinata says, surprised. "Not yet, I'm not," Naruto wheezes. "Sorry about that," Hinata says as she loosens her grip. "Why aren't you passed out?" She asks. "Kyuubi said that I would stop passing out when I admitted my love, and apparently he was right," Naruto says. "Your Pokemon are fully healed," Nurse Joy says as she enters the lobby. At seeing the sight of Naruto and Hinata, she drops the tray in shock. Naruto admitted his feelings to Hinata. How will their relationship grow? What will Nurse Joy have to say about this? Will Samurai ever find Naruto and Hinata? Keep reading to find out. And I would politely request for whoever is reading this to review the story saying what you like about it or what things need to be changed or fixed. Last time on Naruto's new adventure, Ash met Samurai, had a Pokemon battle with him, and defeated him. Naruto and company got captured by Team Rocket, escaped, and teleported to Viridian City's Pokemon Center where they healed up their Pokemon. Naruto confessed his feelings accidentally, and Nurse Joy walked in on Hinata giving Naruto the biggest hug you can imagine. "What are you doing?" Nurse Joy asks sternly while picking up the tray and Pokeballs she dropped. "I'm doing exactly what it looks like," Hinata says with a huge grin on her face. "I'm giving Naruto a hug." "Why exactly are you doing that?" Nurse Joy asks. "Do you need a reason to give someone a hug?" Hinata asks. "Not a normal hug, no, but for giving someone a near-choking hug I would say that there needs to be a reason," Nurse Joy replies. "I guess that's true," Hinata says. "My reason is that Naruto just confessed that he loves me. Is this true?" Nurse Joy asks Naruto. "Yeah, it's true," Naruto replies with the embarrassed back of head rubbing, "but honestly if it were up to me I would have waited a little bit." "What?" ? Nurse Joy says slightly angered. "Why would you do such a thing?" She asks. "I was thinking that we are way too young to have a serious relationship," Naruto replies. "I won't deny that I think that you are too young to be getting married, but you should never not tell someone that you love them because of your age," Nurse Joy says. "Yeah, I already got that Ture from Hinata," Naruto says. "Anyway, what was that slap for?" He asks Hinata. "I couldn't stand you being such an idiot for thinking that I just had to knock some sense into you," Hinata replies. "But I love you too much to stay mad at you long." "That was pretty obvious," Naruto says. Nurse Joy walks over to Naruto and Hinata and says, "Your Pokemon are fully healed." "That's great," Naruto says. "I need to talk to Abra and Mew and find out what they were thinking," and reaches out and grabs his Pokeballs. "Hinata, could you go ahead and let go of me so that I can get up?" He asks. "Sure thing." Hinata replies and let go of Naruto grabbing her Pokeballs. Naruto presses the buttons on 2 of his Pokeballs saying, "Come on out Mew and Abra," and out comes Mew and Abra. Mew flies over to Naruto's shoulder and Abra sits there sleeping. There's no point in talking to Abra when it's sleeping, Naruto thinks and says, "Abra return," and Abra returns to its Pokeball. "I heard that," Mew thinks. "Heard what?" Naruto thinks. "Heard you call Abra and it," Mew thinks. "Do you even have genders?" Naruto thinks. "And how did you hear that?" "We do have genders," Mew thinks, "and I heard that because I read your face thoughts when I was preparing to communicate with you. How would I know what gender you are?" Naruto thinks. "It is under Pokemon info on the Pokédex," Mew thinks. "Until now you've just been looking up the attacks we have. Go ahead and take out your Pokédex and I'll show you what you need to press to see our genders." Naruto takes out the Pokédex and flips it open and thinks, "Which one do I press?" "You press this one," Mew thinks and presses a button on the Pokédex and the screen changes and shows info on the Pokemon Naruto has. "Okay," Naruto thinks as he looks over the info. "It looks like you are female and Abra and Growlithe are both male." "That is correct," Mew thinks. "That's good to know," Naruto thinks. "Now I can refer to you correctly when talking to you and other people." "That would be greatly appreciated," Mew thinks. "Now back to what I was originally going to talk to you about," Naruto thinks. "What were you, Kyuubi, and Abra thinking about when you were ganging up on me?" Kyuubi explained the situation about you having feelings for Hinata but not wanting to admit it, and we all talked about it and figured that by doing what we did we could get you to admit your feeling GS to Hinata without realizing it, and apparently we figured correctly, Mew thinks. "How did you manage to discuss this without me knowing?" Naruto thinks. "Kyuubi explained this to me," Mew thinks. Like you can prevent the Kyuubi from listening in on your thoughts. Kyuubi can prevent you from listening in on his thoughts, and therefore any telepathic communication that is concentrated on just speaking with Kyuubi. When did you even have time to come up with this plan?" Naruto thinks. "When you were training Growlithe and Abra and I were doing nothing," Mew thinks. "I guess I'll need to keep training you so that you can't come up with another plan like this," Naruto thinks, "so prepare for tough training. You can do whatever you want in order to punish us, but we're pleased to know Our plan worked so that you don't have to worry about hiding your true feelings around Hinata. That's true, Naruto thinks, but I really don't like how you forced me into doing that. Either way, Mew thinks, what's done is done and nothing can be done to prevent it from happening now. I guess I'll go ahead and let Hinata know about the information you told me about Pokemon having genders Nar. Yuto thinks and then turns from looking at Mew to Hinata and says, there's something important I need to tell you. What's that? Hinata asks. Pokemon apparently have genders, Naruto says. How do we find out what gender they are? Hinata asks. If you open up the Pokédex I'll show you, Naruto says. Hinata opens up the Pokédex and asks, which one is it? Since she wasn't watching which button Mew pressed, Naruto says, it's this one, and presses the button that Mew pressed on his Pokédex and information comes up on the Pokemon Hinata has. That's interesting, Hinata says. What's interesting? Naruto asks. Apparently Chansey is female and Pidgey and Metapod are male, Hinata says. It's interesting in another way, Naruto says. In what way? Hinata asks. I have one female and 2 male Pokemon as well. Naruto says. My Mew is female and my Growlithe and Abra are male. How about we head to back where we were training? Hinata asks. We don't know if Team Rocket has left or not, therefore I say we shish. Old stay in Viridian City and train, Naruto says. That makes sense, Hinata says. How about we go outside and train then? She asks. Yeah, I think that we've rested enough, Naruto says. We'll see you later, Nurse Joy. See you then, Nurse Joy says, and Naruto and Hinata walk outside the Pokemon Center with Mew flying next to them. Back at Team Rocket's airship they are stunned at what happened when EYC the cage that Naruto and company were put in, or at least what's left of it. What happened? James asks. I thought that they weren't supposed to escape. Apparently we didn't account for how NY were in the cage and they put so much energy into it that they overloaded the system and broke out, Meowth says. We must find them and capture them because Giovanni doesn't accept failure, and who cares now what he'll do if he finds out, James says. Since they were majorly weakened and used teleport, the only place they could go is the Viridian City Pokemon Center, Jessie says. After all, teleport is the only way to escape from our airship with how high we are. Meowth set course for the Viridian City Pokemon Center and do it quickly, James says, and Meowth runs to quickly get to the ship's navigate. On console on the ship's bridge with Jessie and James right behind him. Right when Meowth is about to set the ship's course, the ship's communication system turn on and Giovanni's face appears before them. Jessie, James, Meowth, Giovanni says. Yes sir, all 3 of them say at the same time. Have you managed to capture the kid that you were telling me about last time? Giovanni asks. Yes sir, all 3 of them say, hoping to not get in trouble with Giovanni. Good, then show him to me, Giovanni says. Drat, all 3 of them think. About that sir, James says. We did capture him, and then hesitates a moment. But, Giovanni says. But they escaped before we had a chance to bring him to you. James says quickly. They? Giovanni asks. Yes sir, James says. We had caught the kid, his Pokemon, his companion, and her Pokemon. How did they manage to escape? Giovanni asks. We underestimated their strength and managed to break out of the cage we had put them in, James says. I'm really disappointed in your team, Giovanni says. Would it make you feel better if we told you that part of the reason they escaped was because he had Mew with him? Meowth asks. What? Giovanni says, enraged. That kid had Mew with him. Yes sir, James says, and drops his head. Let me see if I understand this, Giovanni says. Not only have you failed me 2 times in a row, but you had an opportunity to capture Mew both times without success, and you outright lied to me as well. We didn't quite lie to you, Meowth says. We only told you half of the truth. That's it, Giovanni yells. I have no use for people who fail me or for people who I can't trust. You are no longer a part of Team Rocket. Please not that, James kneels and begs. We just wanted to keep you happy. We're sorry. Just give us one more chance. No more chances, Giovanni says, but I do have a surprise for you, and grins evilly. James looks up and asks, What surprise. Giovanni picks up a remote and says, I'm feeling generous. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. 15 minutes for what? James asks. 15 minutes to escape. Giovanni says, escape from what? James asks. Escape from the ship. Giovanni says, why would we do Thar? James asks. Because the ship is going to blow up in 15 minutes. Giovanni says, what? All three of them yell, mouths wide open. I can't very well have someone not a part of Team Rocket to have any of our technology, Giovanni says, and forget about taking any handheld devices. Everything has been disabled on the ship except the communications system, the self-destruct system, and the cargo hold drop door. Better get going quickly, and hits the button. As soon as the button is hit, the screen goes dark, a countdown appears, and a voice comes over the speaker saying, self-destruct in 15 minutes. Have a nice day, and the countdown starts. Quick, let's get down to the cargo hold, James says, and all three of them start running towards the cargo hold. As they run, Jesse says, it's a good thing we stored our old Meowth balloon in the cargo hold. Less talk, more running, James says. When they reach the cargo hold, the automated voice says, self-destruct in 10 minutes. Have a nice day. Quick, get everything out, James say. And all three of them grab parts of the Meowth balloon. Meowth brings out the balloon part of it, James brings out the basket, and Jesse brings out the air heater. All three of them start putting the pieces together over the door that will drop them outside. When they finish strapping up the basket to the balloon and start to fill up the balloon, the automated voice says, self-destruct in 5 minutes. Have a nice day. The balloon gets filled up about halfway when the voice says, self-destruct in 1 minute. Have a nice day. Quick, get into the basket, James says, but the balloon's not filled yet, Jesse says. There's no time, James says, we need to leave now. All right, Jesse says, and she and Meowth hops into the basket. James runs over to the lever that opens up the door when the voice says, self-destruct in 30 seconds. Have a nice day, and James pulls the lever and starts to run back to the basket. Just before the door fully opens, James jumps into the basket and the voice says, self-destruct in 10, 9, 8 inches, and the balloon starts plummeting to the ground. Luckily, before they get too close to the treetops, the balloon catches enough air to act like a parachute. Well, that was lucky, James says, and then the ship blows up and flaming debris starts falling all around them, some falling within mere inches of the balloon, but none of them strike the balloon. Darn that Giovanni, how dare he say he was feeling generous? Jesse says, fuming with anger. I guess he thought that we would never escape and survive, Meowth says, but we showed him. The balloon stops falling and starts lifting into the air. What shall we do now? Jesse asks while curling up with depression. We can't very well go back to Giovanni like this, Meowth says, his head low. There's only one thing we can do, James says, standing tall. What's that? Jesse and Meowth ask while looking at James. We have to catch Naruto and Mew and bring them to Giovanni and show him that he was wrong, James says with a determined look in his eyes. You're right, says Jesse and Meowth, and get up and stand tall. We Team Rocket members will never give up. We will follow them to the end of the earth in order to capture them, and there's a fiery look in all of their eyes. Now head for Viridian City, James says. Yes, sir, Meowth says, and takes over the heater controls. The balloon lifts until it gets high enough where the air current start taking them to Viridian City, and Jesse, James, and Meowth start their journey to become members of Team Rocket again. Will Jesse, James, and Meowth ever become part of Team Rocket again? How far will Naruto and Hinata's relationship go? Keep reading to find out, and I would politely request for whoever is reading this to review the story, saying what you like about it or what things need to be changed or fixed. Last time on Naruto's New Adventure, Naruto got lectured by Nurse Joy and found out about Pokemon gender, and Jesse, James, and Meowth got kicked out of Team Rocket and were nearly killed by Giovanni. We now see Naruto, Hinata, and Mew coming out of the Pokemon Center in Viridian City. Where do you think we should go? Hinata asks. I'm not fully sure, Naruto says, but we shouldn't go back to the spot where we were because Team Rocket might still be there waiting for us to come back. I have an idea, Mew thinks. What's that? Naruto asks. You still need to work on training Growlithe. Correct, Mew thinks. Yeah, Naruto thinks. And the best way to train him is in the woods, right? Mew thinks. For now that is Naruto thinks. So why don't I just teleport us to the outskirts of Viridian Forest and then walk to a different area? Mew asks. Won't Team Rocket find us easily if we head back to the forest? Naruto asks. Not if we go into a densely forested part of the woods where Team Rocket has no chance to get to us by air, Mew thinks. That makes a lot of sense. Naruto thinks. Just let me tell Hinata first. Naruto turns to face Hinata and says, we know where we're going. Hinata turns around and faces Naruto and asks, where are we going? Mew is going to teleport us to the outskirts of Viridian Forest, and from there we are going to walk into a denser part of the woods so that Team Rocket has to follow us on the ground and therefore it will be harder to find us, Naruto says. That's a really good idea, Hinata says. Did you come up with that all by yourself? She asks jokingly. Not realizing Hinata was joking with him, he replies, no, it was actually Mew that came up with this plan. Hinata has a confused look on her face and asks, how can that be? Mew wasn't saying anything. That's right. Naruto says, I forgot to tell you that Mew can speak telepathically. It hasn't come up since Mew has only needed to talk to me. Go ahead and speak up, Mew. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you, Hinata. Mew thinks into both Hinata and Naruto's minds. It's my pleasure to be able to speak with you as well, Hinata says. Why haven't you spoken to me at all? She asks. The stuff that Naruto and I were talking about were fairly private stuff that I know Naruto wouldn't want you to know about, Mew thinks. Of course, Hinata says, if it were something that for me I wouldn't want people to overhear as well. Since you know about Mew being able to speak telepathically, it makes it easier since I don't have to worry about whether I am thinking or speaking out loud, Naruto says. That's true, Hinata says, but I hope that you won't keep everything bothering you to yourself. After all, we are sort of boyfriend-girlfriend now. Speaking of which, Naruto says, I think that we should probably set some limit on what we shall do until we get married. I wouldn't expect anything less, Hinata says, but first let's get to our new training site. Right, you are, Naruto says. Go ahead and beam us to Viridian Forest, Mew. Here we go. Mew thinks, and as Mew prepares to teleport to Viridian Forest, Nurse Joy comes running out of the Pokemon Center with a box in her hands. Hold up. Nurse Joy says, what is it? Naruto asks. I almost forgot to give you a package that Professor Oak teleported to me for you too, Nurse Joy replies. What's in it? Naruto asks. Quote, I don't know. Nurse Joy says, Professor Oak just told me to give it to you if I saw you again. Naruto opens up the box, and in the box are a couple sets of clothes. One set is blue and one set is red along with an orange hat with Konoha's symbol on it in black. Each set contains a denim jacket, a matching colored cotton undershirt, and shorts. What's this about? Naruto asks. I don't know, Hinata says, and then notices a letter in the box, but perhaps this letter will explain everything, and pulls out the letter and opens it. Dear Naruto and Hinata, I would like to thank you for traveling with my son. I was thinking about what I could do to help you out and remembered Oak mentioning that your clothes were a little bit heavy for the weather we normally have and decided to make a set of clothes that would be more comfortable for our weather. The blue set is for Hinata and the red set is for Naruto. I'm sorry that they're not orange since that's your favorite color, but I didn't have any NGE fabric, and though that red would make a good substitute, but I did make an orange hat with the symbol on your headband on it to try to make up a little bit for it. From Delia Ketchum, Ash's mom. P.S. Remind Ash to change his underwear every day the next time you see him for me. That was nice of her, Hinata says. Especially since we could use these to disguise ourselves from Team Rocket if we nay. Ed 2. Naruto says and puts his set of clothes and hat into his backpack and closes it up. Come on, Hinata says. We should just be thankful that she was thinking of us and how to make our travels a little more comfortable. We should just wear them normally, and puts her set of clothes into her backpack and closes it up. How about you come back into the Pokemon Center and change quickly? Nurse Joy asks. Unfortunately we are in a hurry, Hinata says. We've got to leave before Team Rocket finds us here. Well then, have a safe trip, Nurse Joy says. Goodbye, Naruto says. Now beam us out, Miu. Miu rolls her eyes and says, can't you think of something better to say? You don't like it? Naruto asks. It's a classic sci-fi line used for teleporting, which I modified because we are just teleporting along the ground. No, not really, Miu says. I think that it's tacky to say it. Fine, Naruto says. Hate the classics. Here we go, Miu says and teleports them to the outskirts of Viridian Forest. No. Then Miu. Naruto says, it would be best if you start leading us because you can probably tell which way would lead us into denser forest. Probably, Miu thinks. I can most defiantly lead you into the most dense part of this forest, and starts flying off with Naruto and Hinata right behind her. Now then, Hinata says, you were saying that you wanted to limit what we could do until we got married. What is it that have in mind? First of all, Naruto says, I want to save our first real kiss, meaning kissing each other on the lips, for our wedding day. Also hand-holding and hugs are fine, but we can't sleep with each other. We can sleep next to each other but not with each other. Is there anything else? Hinata asks. No, that's it, Naruto says. Well then let's make our relationship more official, Hinata says. How can it be more official than both of us admitting that we love each other? Naruto asks. By starting to act like we're a couple, Hinata says and grabs Naruto's hand and moves a little bit closer to Naruto. When Hinata does this, Naruto gets a nervous look on his face. Seeing this, Hinata says, come on Naruto, there's no reason to look nervous. It's just us and our Pokemon out here, and I love you enough to not break any of the limits you set. That's good to know, Naruto says and relaxes a little bit. As Naruto and Hinata follow Miu, the forest starts to get denser. Eventually it gets dense enough that low branches start to catch Hinata's dress. Noticing this, Naruto calls out to Miu, hold up a little bit, what is it? Miu asks. Hinata can't go much further without risking damage to her dress, Naruto says, since it would be a shame to damage such a gift. Hinata's going to change into her other clothes, could you at least hurry up? Miu asks. I'll try, Hinata says and walks a couple of trees back and hides behind one, where she takes off her backpack, unzips it, and pulls out the set of clothes that Delia Ketchum made her. A couple of minutes later, Hinata finishes changing, puts the dress into the backpack, zips it back up, and walks back to Naruto. Ready to head out? Naruto asks. Most definitely, Hinata says. Go ahead and continue leading us, Miu, Naruto says. Miu starts flying again with Naruto and Hinata following. After a little bit, Naruto asks, this has been bugging me slightly. If you are so beautiful, why do you try to hide it with such baggy clothes? I'm not exactly wearing baggy clothes at this moment, Hinata says. That's true, Naruto says, but before we arrived in this world you always wore baggy clothes. Why was that? He asks. Hinata blushes slightly and asks, why should I show off my figure and have people swarming me just because of that? Why to think they would do that? Naruto asks. You've seen how all the girls had acted around Sasuke and would rather not be put in a situation like that, Hinata says. I guess it makes sense that you would worry about that, Naruto says, but you don't have to worry now that I'm your boyfriend. If you feel uncomfortable with someone, I'll just scare them off. Don't go overboard with scaring them, Hinata says. Don't worry, I won't, Naruto says. I'm serious, I don't want anyone getting hurt, Hinata says. I promise I won't go overboard with scaring people you feel uncomfortable around, Naruto says. That's good to hear, Hinata says. By the way, where are we headed? She asks. Only Miu knows that, Naruto says, and to Miu he asks, are we almost there? Just a few more minutes, Miu replies. Where are you taking us? Hinata asks Miu. A special place where Team Rocket should never find us as well as a perfect place for training, Miu replies. Hinata. Naruto says. Yeah, Hinata says. When we get to the training area, do you think you could teach me how to do the double-handed Rasengan? Naruto asks. Sure thing, Hinata says. It's pretty simple to understand and I think that you could learn it even easier because of the way you make your Rasengans. Really? Naruto says. Yeah, Hinata says, "I'll explain everything when we get to wherever we're going." A few minutes later Naruto, Hinata, and Mew come out at a clearing where the tree branches intersect each other to make it look like a dome with just enough room to allow light to come in, which is the color of the sun setting with fruit lining the branches, and in the middle of it is a lake. "Wow, this is really awesome," Hinata says. "I knew you would like it," Mew says, "and doesn't it make a perfect defense from the air?" "It sure does," Naruto says, "and it's an even better training ground than our last spot, but if you knew this was here, why didn't we just teleport here?" "It was to spend some time getting here so that we would get here around sunset, and it was good exercise anyway," Mew says. "Since it's close to nighttime, we had better start setting up camp," Naruto says. "I agree completely," Hinata says. "I'll go gather firewood so that we can cook some of this fruit. I'll give Growlithe a little training by using his aura to climb tree and head out to the branches to get the fruit," Naruto says and grabs Growlithe's Pokeball, pressing the button, and says, "Growlithe, come on out," throwing the Pokeball, and Growlithe appears. Growlithe says. Hinata heads off to gather firewood, and once out of sight of Naruto takes off her backpack and changes back into the dress that Misty gave her. Back at Naruto, Growlithe has run up the tree and heads out onto the branch and arrives at the first piece of fruit, grabbing it softly in its mouth and breaking it off the branch, tossing it away from the branch. "Okay Mew, teleport to the piece of fruit, grab it, teleport it back here, drop it off, and repeat until Growlithe finishes tossing fruit." "Okay Naruto," Mew thinks and starts teleporting, getting the falling fruit. After a mi, Mute goes by. Nato says, "Growlithe, pick up the pace and really give Mew a challenge." "Growl," Growlithe says and starts to pick up the pace. Soon it becomes too much for Mew to handle and creates a shadow clone to help gather the fruit. After another minute has gone by, Naruto says, "That's enough Growlithe, we've got plenty of food," and Growlithe jumps down from the branch he's on, landing perfectly. Quote, "Good job you two," Naruto says, "Thanks to you two we've got enough food to last a couple of days." "That was hard work," Mew says. "That's because you were using a lot of energy teleporting back and forth. Which means that you were training your endurance," Naruto says. "You try to train whenever you can, don't you?" Mew asks. "Of course," Naruto says, "it would be a waste to not train when you have the possibility to." At that point Hinata walks in with plenty of firewood and then walks over and sets it next to the pile of fruit. "That's quite a bit of fruit," Hinata says. "Yeah, while gathering fruit Growlithe and Mew were training and gathered enough fruit to last us a few days," Naruto says. "I noticed that you changed back into your dress," he comments. "Yeah," Hinata says, "this dress is really comfort AB. And anyways, since we are together, I want you to see my figure." Naruto grabs a few pieces of wood, starting to make a fire, and says, "I can understand that. Besides, with how beautiful you are, you shouldn't hide your figure, but it is odd." "What's odd?" Hinata asks. "It's odd that Misty would have a dress that fits perfectly when we just met her here in the Viridian Forest," Naruto says, "especially S. Oh, since from what I could tell you two have completely different figures." "You were comparing our figures?" Hinata asks, slightly mad. "Hold on now," Naruto says, quickly putting up his hands. "That came out wrong. What I mean is that it was hard to not notice the differences in your two figures when you two were standing side by side." As Naruto gets a flame started on the fire, Hinata says, "That's good. 'Cause if it was anything else I would have to do something drastic." "What would that be?" Naruto asks nervously. Hinata smiles, saying, "That doesn't matter, 'cause you would never hurt me, would you?" There's a steady flame. Naruto starts taking some of the shark twigs, pierce the skin of the fruit and set them up to start cooking. Then he says, "The only way that I would hurt you is if I get possessed by something." "Naruto," Hinata says excitedly and pounced at Naruto. "Oof," Naruto says when Hinata hits him and they both hit the ground, Hinata giving Naruto a giant hug. "What was that for?" Naruto asks. "The fact that I can trust you while you remain in control of yourself." Hinata says. "Well, could you warn me before you pounce on me?" Naruto asks. "Why would I do that?" Hinata asks. "I'm still fully used to how much you show your love for me," Naruto says, "and we could get seriously hurt if you pounce on me at the wrong time." "Fine," Hinata says, slightly pouting, but can we at least lie like this until the food is ready? Sure thing, Naruto says. A few minutes go by with Hinata lying on top of Naruto hugging each other. The fruit finally finishes cooking and Hinata and Naruto get up calling out their Pokemon and they all sit down and eat. Back at Misty and Ash, they have had a day of sparring with each other after Ash's battle with Samurai. Now they sit down to start eating with their Pokemon, and out of the tree a Caterpie jumps out and lands in front of Misty. A bug, Misty screams and kicked it. It flies and hits the trunk of a tree and falls down knocked out. Wow, a rare Caterpie, Ash says, I'm going to catch it. Please don't, Misty begs. One bug Pokemon is fine, two creeps me out slightly, but I don't think I could stand three. I can't let this chance get away, Ash says. Normal Caterpies are green, but this one is like a golden yellow in color. I must catch, and grabs a Pokeball, presses the button and tosses it at the Caterpie. The Caterpie gets caught easily. At the very least, could you keep it away from me? Misty asks. I won't order Caterpie to get close to you if that's what you mean, Ash says. Now Caterpie, come on out, and Caterpie materializes. When Caterpie sees Misty, it runs over and starts rubbing against Misty's leg and Misty screams. Come on Misty, Ash says, Caterpie is just showing how much it likes you. You know I hate bugs, Misty says, now get this disgusting thing away from me. Caterpie makes a sound and starts tearing up and heads back to its Pokeball, head down. Caterpie, are you okay? Ash asks. Caterpie walks to its Pokeball, which Ash conveniently left on a stump, hits it, and goes into it. Caterpie, Ash says and yells at Misty, see what you've done. Caterpie was just trying to be friendly with you and you hurt its feelings. Well, it should have stayed far away from me, Misty says, and you shouldn't be calling Caterpie it. Why don't you look up your Pokemon's gender before you start talking? I forgot to do it, that's all, Ash says. Well, you had better not forget from now on, Misty says. A Pokemon could be more saddened by being talked like they're an object than anything I could say. Fine, I'm looking it up now, Ash says, pulling out his Pokédex and looking up his Pokemon's gender. So what gender are they? Misty asks. Pikachu and Spearow are male and Caterpie and Kakuna are female, Ash says. Better keep that in mind when you're talking about your Pokemon. Misty says. I will, Ash says. Ash and Misty cook dinner, call out their Pokemon, eat, set up their beds, and fall asleep without saying another word to each other. Naruto and Hinata finish eating and Naruto says, better set up our beds now. What else could we do? Hinata asks. We could stay up until morning training, Naruto says, but I think that would be a bad idea. You're probably right, Hinata says. Of course he's right, Mew says, without proper rest you will be unable to train to the fullest. Besides, Mew thinks to herself, once you all go to sleep I can have some fun with Naruto. Naruto and Hinata lean up against a nearby tree and lay their blankets on themselves with all their Pokemon sleeping around them. Once everyone looks asleep to Hinata, he gives Naruto a hug and snuggles up next to him, thinking, I hope Naruto won't mind. After all, he never mentioned anything about not snuggling with each other, and falls asleep. Little does Hinata know that Mew was only pretending to be asleep. Finally, since I've learned that attack, I can show Naruto what he's missing, Mew thinks. I wouldn't normally do this, but Naruto's even more of a knucklehead than I thought. Naruto World. A month has gone by since Naruto's disappearance with no sign of him. At this time Rock Lee has decided to go find Naruto himself. It has been boring in Konoha and no one has managed to give him a good enough challenge. Naruto was the only one that gave him a challenge when sparring, therefore he must find Naruto and bring him back in order to properly train himself. Late one night Rock Lee sneaks out of the village thinking that no one has seen him, but an Anbu was watching and saw him leave. He heads back to the Hokage's room to report in. What a nice night it is, Tsunade says, and the Anbu comes in through the window startling her. What's going on? Tsunade asks. It is exactly like you thought. Rock Lee has headed out of the village, very possibly to try to find Naruto, the Anbu says. Thanks for the update, Tsunade says. We haven't had any luck finding Naruto, so we'll let him go for now. If a few months go by without Rock Lee reporting in, we'll send the Rookie 9 and the rest of Lee's team to retrieve him. Shouldn't we send someone to retrieve him now? The Anbu asks. There's no stopping Lee, Tsunade says. You forget that my guy trained Lee Pei. RS only, which means that if you do try to catch him he'll just take off his weights and escape from you easily, and after that there's no way that you could keep up with him. Okay, but can we at least send someone to follow him? The Anbu asks. Sure, just don't let him see you, Tsunade says. The Anbu then heads off following the path Lee took. By the time Lee gets to the last place that Naruto was, the Valley of the End, it is about noon of the next day. He walks out to the edge of the river and says, this was the last place that Naruto was seen. There should be some sort of clue about where he went here. The Anbu arrives at the Valley of the End just as the sun reaches its highest point in the sky. Suddenly a beam of red light comes from the ground near where Lee is and shoots into the sky. What's that? Lee asks and goes over to investigate. Lee stands in front of it and says, this has to be the path to find Naruto, but why it is here I have no clue. As the sun starts moving out of its highest point, the red beam starts to fade. This may be my only chance to find Naruto, Lee says and jumps into the red beam, and as soon as Lee is in the beam there's a flash of light and he's vanished. I better let Lady Tsunade know about this, the Anbu thinks and heads back to Konoha. Pokemon World. There's a flash of light and Lee appears inside of Ash's room. Where am I? Lee asks, and where's Naruto? After a minute of looking around in Ash's room, Lee heads downstairs and outside. I think I'm in trouble, Lee thinks. I don't recognize anything at all, and starts walking down the road. As Lee gets to the edge of Pallet Town, a bird Pokemon swoops down, appearing to come out of the moon, and tries to attack Lee, landing close to him. So you want to challenge me? Lee says. Spearow, the bird Pokemon says and flies at Lee. Leaf Hurricane, Lee says and does a spinning jump kick at Spearow and knocks Spearow to the ground, injuring it but not knocking it out. Spearow picks itself off the ground and screams out, Spearow, in an alarm-like way, waking many Spearow, who sent out more alarms until all the Spearow close to Pallet Town are awake and all swarm Lee. So you all want to take me on? Lee says. Let's do this, and get a happy gleam in his eyes. All the Spearow dive at Lee at once, and Lee uses many taijutsu moves to attack the Spearow, hitting a few of them but unable to stop the swarm. As the swarm of Spearows attacks Lee, he thinks, I'm really in trouble now. It's time for me to run. The Spearows finish the first wave and back off so the second wave can attack, and Lee says, got to go. I left the stove on at my house, and runs so fast towards Viridian City that he looks like the fastest thing alive. Too bad that title has already been taken. Unfortunately, the Spearow chase him and keep pace with him. Will Lee manage to lose the Spearow? Will he find Naruto and Hinata? Will Team Rocket ever find Naruto and company again? What does Mew have planned? Keep reading to find out, and I would politely request for whoever is reading this to review the story, saying what you like about it or what things need to be changed or fixed. Last time on Naruto's new adventure, Naruto and Hinata arrived at their new training spot. Ash caught a rare-colored Caterpie, and Rock Lee arrived in the Pokemon world and angered a few hundred Spearow and is currently being chased by them. When the moon reaches the highest point in the sky for the night, Lee comes to the outer part of Viridian City with the Spearows still on his tail. As Lee runs through Viridian City, Jessie, James, and Meowth fly into the city. Around the Pokemon Center, the two group cross paths and a few of the Spearow go and pop Jessie, James, and Meowth's balloon, sending it flying off into the night sky. As Lee runs, RS, Team Rocket is blasting off again, and sees a twinkle in the sky for a second and reaches the other side of Viridian City quickly. As Lee nears Viridian Forest, he thinks, perhaps I can lose these creatures if I head into a dense part of the woods, and as he runs into Viridian Forest he sees what looks like a path that was recently taken that leads into a denser part of the woods and takes it, and the Spearow keep following him. Lee looks back after another hour of running and notices that the forest has gotten so dense that the Spearow are no longer able to swarm him, and turns around and starts attacking them one by one, causing a commotion which could wake up everyone sleeping just a few feet away in the clearing. As the sun starts to rise, Lee has defeated a lot of the Spearow who have flown off, but there are still plenty more wanting to attack Lee, and Lee is starting to get tired. Mew wakes up from a quick nap because the sounds of fighting going on nearby and flies over, thinking, what's going on? Mew flies over and sees Lee fighting off all the Spearow and thinks, they are making too much noise. I had better stop them before they make so much noise that Naruto and Hinata whack. Up. Mew proceeds to close her eyes and start glowing blue around her body. Suddenly the Spearow stop mid-air glowing blue and get launched against many of the nearby trees. Then they all fly off on the opposite direction out of the forest, and Lee collapses against the trunk of the tree completely exhausted and falls asleep. That takes care of them, Mew thinks. I had better get back before Hinata wakes up so that I can put my plan into action. Hopefully Naruto wakes up first, otherwise it will get very complicated. As Mew flies back to the tree, Naruto starts waking up from all the noise that Mew made by throwing all the Spearow against the tree. Oh, no, Mew thinks. I had better start putting my plan into action, and as Mew flies to the tree branch she glows blue and a blue glow goes over the outline of Hinata. Naruto fully wakes up and sees Hinata and thinks, why is Hinata holding me like this and why is Hinata glowing like that? Hinata's eyes open slowly with a blank look that can clearly be seen as Hinata still being asleep, and Hinata moves in trying to kiss Naruto on the lips and sliding the strap of her dress down her arm. Seeing this, Naruto thinks, Hinata must be sleepwalking, sort of, and doesn't know what she is doing. It just wouldn't be right to allow her to do anything, and moves his head to side so that Hinata can't kiss him on the lips and put his hand in Hinata's hand and slides the strap back up onto Hinata's shoulder. Hinata keeps trying to do what she was trying to, being persistent about it. To this Naruto thinks, something is wrong here. A person who's sleepwalking can't possibly know where they are headed, and in this case there's no way she can know that I am moving aside and where my face and lips are, and just keeps dodging. Seeing this, Mew starts to get frustrated, thinking, this is going like I wanted. I hoped that he was just setting limits because it was the right thing to do and not because he didn't really want them doing it, but Naruto is just being too chivalrous. I didn't really want to do this, but it looks like I'm going to have to. And Naruto's body starts to glow blue along the outline. What's going on? Naruto thinks. I can't control my body anymore, and Naruto hugs Hinata and they move in for a kiss. As their faces start to get closer, Naruto thinks, I must figure out what's going on. I must not do this even if my body isn't in my control, and starts moving his eyes around and spots Mew and notices that her body is glowing the same color as both of their bodies. So Mew is doing this, but why is she doing this especially? I made it clear that I didn't want this sort of thing going on, and rage starts to build within Naruto. Just before Naruto and Hinata's lip meet, there's a sudden burst of chakra from Naruto throwing them apart, which causes Hinata to land in the lake and disrupting Mew's attack, and Naruto stands there with the Kyuubi cloak two tails form and yells at Mew, how dare you do this to us? A combinati. On of the cold water and Naruto's yell awaken Hinata, and she sees Naruto with the two-tail cloak and runs over to him and asks, what's wrong? Why are you so mad? Mew just did something that is neural. Why unforgivable? Naruto yells, what did she do? Hinata asks, it is not what she did, but what she was trying to do. Naruto yells, what was she trying to do? Hinata asks, she was forcefully controlling our bodies to 1 try to get us to kiss and 2 try to get you to partially undress yourself. Is this true? Hinata asks Mew. At least give me a chance to explain myself, Mew says. What do you say? Hinata asks Naruto, will you give Mew a chance to explain herself? You had better have had a good reason, Naruto growls. I was only trying to show you what Hinata really wanted to do, Mew says. Is this true? Naruto asks Hinata. Hinata blushes slightly and says, it is true that I really want to show you how much I love you, and I do feel that our relationship is really limited, but I love and respect you enough to follow whatever limits you set. You see, Mew, she would not have done it willingly, so why were you doing it? Naruto growls. I was thinking that if you had it happen once that you would make it less limited, Mew says, but no matter what I couldn't get you to do it. Is this true? Hinata asks. Yes, Naruto says, since you were still asleep at the time I couldn't let something happen that you didn't know was happening. That's so sweet, Hinata says and gives Naruto a big hug. This calmed down Naruto and the Kyuubi cloak disappears. Naruto, realizing Hinata is wet and shivering, asks, what happened? I just landed in the lake when you got enraged, Hinata says. Well, you can't stay in those wet clothes, Naruto says, go ahead and get changed. Would you help me change? Hinata asks sweetly. Sorry, but that just would be right, Naruto says and leaves the clearing so that Hinata can change. After Hinata changes and calls Naruto back, Naruto says, now back to what we were talking about. Yeah, Mew says. You know that there is going to be a punishment for doing this, right? Naruto says more calmly. Yeah, I know, Mew says, but it was well worth it. You may not be saying that after I tell you your punishment, Naruto says. So what is my punishment? Mew asks. I haven't thought of one deserving of what you did, Naruto says, but I will. At that moment Lee walks into the clearing street. Ill a little bit sleepy and asks, what's going on here? Hey look, it's Bushy Brow, Naruto says. Disappears. How did you get here? Naruto. Hinata. Lee asks, where are we? And how did you get here? We got a lot to catch you up on, Naruto says. Let's sit down and go over each of our stories. Naruto, Hinata, and Lee all sit down and go over their story. After they get done, Lee says, let me get is right, we are no longer anywhere in our but in a whole new world where creatures with powers roam free and you catch them and train them. I find that hard to believe. Any harder than having a month go by for you when only a few days have gone by for us. Naruto asks, I see what you mean. Lee says, what's even harder to believe is that you two have become a couple in those few days. Yeah, well, Naruto says, Hinata has always those feelings for me and I had feelings for her but was too much of an idiot to recognize it, but anyway you said that there's a path that brought you here to this world. Yeah, Lee says, but I couldn't see it until the sun was at the right point in the sky. That could be a problem, Naruto says, especially if Akatsuki finds out. Then we should train and prepare for them, Lee says. Lee's right, Hinata says. We should spend our time training ourselves and our Pokemon to prepare for their arrival. I know what I'm going to have Mew doing, Naruto says with an evil grin on his face. What? Hinata asks. Bushy Brows mentioned that the reason he was searching was because he wanted to spar, but since I'll be working on a new technique, I'll have Mew spar with Bushy Brows. That should really teach Mew a lesson, Naruto says. But Bushy Brows, you need to rest so today, which means you'll have your sparring match tomorrow, and today Mew will help train Growlithe. Well then let's get to work, Hinata says. Naruto and Hinata wake up the rest of their Pokemon, since apparently they are heavy sleepers, and give them their training schedule for the day. Naruto decides to train Growlithe with a variation of the tree climbing training, using it to teach Growlithe to walk on water, and after Growlithe masters that, Abra and Mew try distracting Growlithe, making it more difficult. And Hinata decides to have her Pokemon spar against each other to do basic training to have them gain experience. Hinata and Naruto head over to near the edge of the clearing to start Naruto training to learn the double-handed Rasengan. You said that learning this technique should be easy, Naruto says. In theory yes, Hinata says. The way I figure it is that you make a shadow clone to rotate the chakra while you release the chakra and compress it, but you always do it with your right hand. Therefore if you start out by practicing doing it in your left hand and then you make a Rasengan in nay hand and then make it in the other hand while maintaining the first one and then make them together at the same time. You call that easy? Naruto asks. Yes, Hinata says. Compared to making both without shadow clones, it is easier. For the rest of the day everyone except Lee trains, only taking meal breaks, and by then end of the day Growlithe and Naruto have mastered their new technique and Hinata's Metapod has evolved into a Butterfree. When setting up camp for the night, Naruto and Hinata decide to give one of their blankets to Lee and both sleep under the other one, placing away from each other. Ash and Misty wake up and have breakfast, and after that a rare Pidgeotto flies into their campsite. What makes this Pidgeotto rare is that the feathers on its head and tail are more golden color instead of the normal red, and its body color is slightly lighter. Wow, Ash says, how lucky, and I caught a rare Caterpie last night and now I have a chance to catch a rare Pidgeotto. Let's go. Pikachu, and Pikachu runs out in front of Pidgeotto. Seeing this, Pidgeotto flies up into the air and dives at Pikachu. Pikachu, let's finish this in one move, Ash says. Use Thunderbolt now. Pikachu, lets loose a big bolt of electricity at Pidgeotto and hits its mark, leaving Pidgeotto in the air with sparks of electricity arcing around it. Ash grabs an empty Pokeball, pushes the button and throws it at Pidgeotto, saying, "Pokeball go," and catches Pidgeotto easily. After catching Pidgeotto, he looks up the gender and finds that Pidgeotto is a female. Though the rest of the day Ash trains with Misty, and by the end of the day his Kakuna evolves into Beedrill, and Misty and Ash set up camp, have their meal and head off to bed. Jessie, James, and Meowth wake up after being pecked out of the air by the Spearow. See the damage to their balloon, and start getting to work fixing it. While working on it, Jessie says, "Since we are no longer a part of Team Rocket, we need to come up with a new line." We see A&T exactly say Team Rocket is blasting off again. You have any suggestions? James asks. Not right now, but it is something we should think about along with a new team name, Jessie says. First let's finish fixing our balloon and then we can think of these things, James says. Jessie, James, and Meowth finish fixing their balloon without saying anything else, and by the time they finish, night has fallen. They fill up their balloon and make their way back to Viridian City in order to find Naruto and his group. Will Jessie, James, and Meowth figure out a new team name with an appropriate exiting line? How will Lee get along in this world? Will he become a trainer as well? Keep reading to find these answers and more, and I would politely request for whoever is reading this to review the story eyeing what you like about it or what things need to be changed or fixed. Random AN. One thing that I notice is that there are a lot of crossovers of Naruto with other shows, and yet I've never found a Naruto sci-fi reality crossover. Confused? Let me explain. An experimental accident with a teleporter causes a person from our world to split between body and soul. While the body remains in our world, the soul gets transported to Naruto's world during the time which Naruto would be in the Ninja Academy, where the soul starts to disappear. The only way for the soul to exist in Naruto's world is to bond. To another Persona body best comparison is something similar to the Kyuubi's being sealed into Naruto, except that the soul isn't trapped. This person happened to be a geek and has extensive knowledge of the show Naruto. How will this knowledge affect the events that play out in the show? This was just a really random idea that I came up with for another story and was curious about what you think of this idea. Another AN. See previous chapter AN about possibly getting close to M-rated material, but after checking the ratings and what all is applicable to it, I think this is perfectly fine. Enough of my rambling. Back to the story. Chapter 11. Pokemon World. The sun rises upon the sleeping group of Naruto, Hinata, Rock Lee, and Naruto's and Hinata's Pokemon. Rock Lee wakes up and stretches out a little bit. Lee looks over and sees everyone asleep still and thinks, might as well get a little bit of training before they wake up, and starts his taijutsu training. Naruto and Hinata along with Ihr Pokemon wake up about an hour later and see Rock Lee training. Hey bushy brows, Naruto yells at Lee, don't overdo it. You still have your sparring match against Mew and trust me, it won't be easy. That's interesting, Lee thinks. Naruto must know something that I don't, because even though Naruto may give me a challenge, I still barely beat him, which means that Mew must be close to being as strong as Naruto, and yells back, I'm done for now, so now that we are all awake, let's get breakfast started. Sure thing, Naruto says, but how about we go gather some firewood to cook some apples for breakfast, he asks. Sure thing, Hinata and Lee reply, and Lee goes running off into the forest, but Naruto stops Hinata before she can head off into the woods. What's wrong? Hinata asks. Nothing really, Naruto replies, I was just trying to get Lee away from the lake because I figured that you might want to take a bath since we haven't had one for a few days and didn't want you to worry about either Lee or I seeing you naked. That's thoughtful of you, Hinata says while thinking, but Naruto, I honestly want you to see me naked. I want to be with you always as your wife and would rather have you get used to seeing me naked now rather than later on. Mew overhears this thought and a cunning gleam appears in her eyes for a second when she thinks, I know how to have your wish become reality. Well, I'll be seeing you later, Hinata, Naruto says, and before heading off he says, oh yeah Mew, could you let me know when it's safe to come back and stop Lee whichever way you can if he comes back early? Your thing, Naruto, she says, and Naruto heads off into the woods, leaving Hinata alone with the Pokemon. Hinata undresses by tree where she and Naruto had been sleeping and grabs the blanket to use as a towel, wraps it around her, and then heads over to the lake. Hinata takes off the blanket and steps into the lake shivering a little bit. The water's a little bit cold but it's better than nothing. Hi, Hinata says to herself and proceeds to take her bath. After a few minutes have gone by, Mew heads out to find Naruto to let him know that it's okay to come back. Since Naruto hadn't wandered off too far, he sees Mew flying towards him, and when Mew reaches him he says, "Let me guess, it's okay to come back now." "Yep," she says. The water was a little too cold, therefore she ended up taking a short bath. Quote, "Well, let's go ahead and head back then," Naruto says and heads back towards camp with Mew keeping some distance between them. When Naruto reaches their camp he says, "Hey Hinata, ready to get back to training?" And then spots Hinata stepping out of the lake and thinks, "Wow, she's beautiful." No, stop that, quick turn around before she sees you looking at her, and turns around so that his back is to her. When she turns and sees Naruto standing there, "Oh hi Naruto," Hinata says while wrapping the blanket around herself, "What are you doing here?" She asks, "Mew said that you were done taking your bath," and Naruto replies, "And I thought that perhaps we should get back to training." "Well, did you enjoy what you saw?" Hinata asks. "Darn it, how did she know?" Naruto thinks and says with sweat dropping down his face, "I don't know what you're talking about." Hinata slowly moves closer to Naruto and says sweetly, "You can't hide anything from me. I heard you walking up and used my Byakugan to see you looking at me." Naruto then put his hands up and says, "Okay, you caught me red-handed, but I didn't mean to see anything." "Calm down Naruto," Hinata says as she gives Naruto a big hug. "I'm not mad at you. I actually wanted something like this to happen." "Why would you want me looking at you like that?" Naruto asks. "Well, we are going to be married someday," Hinata says. "What's that got to do with anything?" Naruto asks. "Well, I don't want you to be nervous to see me naked when we do get married," Hinata replies and then asks, "So what did you think?" Naruto turns around and put his hands on Hinata's shoulders, looks her right in the face and says, "No matter what, you'll always be beautiful." At that moment Mew flies at Naruto and Hinata, knocking them over so that Naruto is on top of Hinata and then flies back into the woods. Naruto looks at Hinata and blushes and then rolls away quickly, looking away, heart beating quickly. "What's wrong?" Hinata asks. Me that position," Naruto says. "We should never be in that position until we are married." "What's so wrong with it?" Hinata asks. "It's an extremely compromising position," Naruto replies, "especially since you only have the blanket covering you." Hinata goes up to Naruto and gives him a hug, a little kiss on the cheek, saying, "I'm not worried at all. I know that you're too much of a gentleman to do anything like that unless it was something that both of us wanted, and right now you just don't want it. Could just go get dressed please?" Naruto asks. "Sure thing," Hinata replies and lets go of Naruto and starts walking over to get dressed. "Hinata, you don't know how wrong you are," Naruto thinks. "It's not that I don't want to do it, but that it's something sacred that only married couples should be doing, and I worry that something may happen that would cause me to throw my beliefs out the window and just end up doing it with you. Just be patient with me." As Hinata walks over to the tree where her clothes are, Mew senses Rock Lee approaching and hinks, "There's no way I'm letting stumble upon this scene," and flies off to stall Rock Lee. Just as Rock Lee is about to approach the clearing with the firewood he has gathered, Mew flies right in front of him. "What do you want?" Lee asks. "I'm not letting go one step further," Mew says and puts up a fighting stance. "You think you can stop me?" Rock Lee says. "Let's just see you try," and sets the firewood to the side and puts up a fighting stance. Rock Lee and Mew stare each other sewn for a second, and then Rock Lee runs at Mew. "You'll have to do better than that," Mew says and uses confusion to top Rock Lee in his tracks and then launch him against a tree. "Give up," Mew says. "You're too slow to possibly beat me." "I'm too slow you say," Rock Lee says. "Then I'd better pick up the pace," and jumps up into the tree. What's he doing? Mew thinks. Rock Lee proceeds to pull down his socks and grab the weights on his leg, then drop them from the tree. Hinata finishes dressing and suddenly there's a loud boom and the earth shakes. "What was that?" Hinata asks. It looks like Bushy Brows has started fighting Mew and has gotten serious, Naruto replies. Well, we had better make certain they don't hurt themselves too bad. Hinata says. Let's go, Naruto says, and both Naruto and Hinata head off into the forest. Let's see you handle this, Rock Lee says and quickly rushes at Mew. Naruto and Hinata arrive just in time to see a green blur run at Mew and hit her in the gut. Mew hits a tree and gets up thinking, he's too fast for me to use confusion on. I guess I had better use this then, and flies into the air and makes many shadow clones. Wow, Mew thinks, he's a lot better than I thought. I'd better start getting serious. Mew then gets back into the air and makes 3 clones of herself. Yo, you had better come up with something better, Lee says. I've already beaten this strategy, and proceeds to take out these clones just like he did the other one, but just as he's about to hit the first one, all of them teleport to various locations, leaving Lee heading for a tree, but Lee sees this and stops spinning and lands on the tree safely and grabs a tree branch and get on it. Where did you disappear? Lee thinks, and suddenly a Mew appears with a Rasengan ready to hit Lee, but Lee notices in time and dodges it at the last second, causing Mew to hit the tree, taking it out along with a few others, sending broken wood everywhere. Mew can even use Rasengan. Lee thinks, I really need to be careful, and lands on the ground, and as soon as he does, another Mew appears launching another Rasengan, and Lee jumps into the air to dodge it, leaving Mew to hit ground, causing a giant crater to be made. Wow, that was close, Lee thinks, and another Mew appears in midair launching a Rasengan. This time Lee kicks it, causing it to disappear. 1 clone down, Lee thinks, now where is the original? Meanwhile the original Mew is hiding, watch everything, and thinks, all my moves are unable to hit him. I guess T's time use a combo move that I've been wanting to try, and makes a Rasengan, then using confusion sends it out towards Lee, and as Lee lands he sees a floating Rasengan. Taking it as a sign, all the her Mews do the same thing until there are Rasengans surrounding Lee on all sides. Give up now, Mew says, as you can see there's no way out and would rather not cause serious harm to you by attacking you with these. There's still a chance, Lee thinks, there's one flaw with this, but it will be risky, and says, I'll never give up. Have it your way, Mew says, and sends the Rasengans in towards Lee, and as she does, Lee takes the opportunity to drop to the ground, roll out, and run towards the voice he heard. Not noticing that Lee escaped the trap, the Rasengans explode in a greater area than at Mew expected, destroying many trees and even sending wood shards at Naruto and Hinata. Byakugan and 8 trigrams protection are heard barely, and when the dust clears, Naruto and Hinata standing without any damage to them. That's a relief, Mew thinks, now to go see Lee's defeated face, but when she get to where Lee was supposed to be, Lee's not there. Where is he? Mew thinks, did he escape? And starts looking around frantically. While Mew looks around frantically, Lee watches, waiting for his chance, and at the right time runs so fast that he appears to have appeared from nowhere and gives a GHT kick to Mew, which launches her into a tree, knocking her out, and then sits down completely exhausted. Wow, that was a tough fight, Lee says, I just barely managed to beat her. Naruto and Hinata wall up to Lee, and Naruto says, what I wonder is how you managed to escape from that Rasengan trap. Oh Naruto, Hinata, were you watching the fight? Lee asks. Yeah, we came in when you delivered that punch to Mew's gut. Naruto says. What move was that? Hinata asks. Which move are you talking about? Lee asks. The move that you used to take out Mew's shadow clones, Hinata replies. Oh, that one, Lee says. It's a move that I actually came up with myself. I call it spin dashing. The only problem is that I can only use it once I have taken my weights off, which means that I can't use it all that often. Excuse me, Naruto says. Oh yeah, Naruto, Lee says. I managed to escape because Mew left the Rasengans hovering enough above the ground to just barely roll out of it. It was a risky move because if she had noticed what I was doing, she could have just lowered the Rasengans, hitting me. Wow, that really was a close fight then, Hinata says. Yeah, she used a lot of moves that I didn't expect, Lee says. If she had a little more training, then who knows, I may not have been able to beat her. Go ahead and grab the firewood and let's head back, Naruto says. I'll go ahead and carry Mew back to camp so that she can rest up. Alright, Lee says, "Hey Hinata, could you help me carry some of this back? We got quite a lot," and points at the fallen tree and the pieces that have broken off into small enough pieces for firewood. "Sure thing," Hinata says and helps Lee gather the wood. When Hinata and Lee finish getting the last of the wood, Naruto has started a fire and has already started cooking some of the apples. "Be right back," Lee says. "I need to go grab my weights." When Lee has left, Mew wakes up and asks, "What happened?" "You got beat by Lee," Naruto says, and from the sounds of it the main reason How you lost is because you were overconfident. "Yeah, I honestly that I wouldn't have any trouble beating him," Mew says. "Perhaps this will teach you to treat any opponent as if they are just as strong as you, if not stronger," Naruto says. "I'll try," Mew says. "You've had enough for today," Naruto says. "Now eat one these apples and rest up," and tossed one the already cooked apples to Mew. Mew eats it, and as she starts to fall asleep she hears Hinata ask, "Why didn't you get mad at her for pulling that trick on you?" And here's Naruto reply, "Mew is just trying to push our relationship along but is going about it the wrong way. Besides, she got beat up enough to cover for her two pranks, and thinks, I guess I might as well lighten up a little bit. I've been pushing too much. They will do something when they are ready to," and falls asleep. Lee comes back from finding his weights and Lee, Naruto, Hinata, and all the Pokemon sit down to eat breakfast. Jesse, James, and Meowth finally reach the Pokemon Center in Viridian City and start dropping bombs on it from their Meowth balloon. "It's a good thing that we had these bombs stashed away for such an occasion," Meowth says. "Yeah, now we'll find out where that Naruto kid is as well his Mew," James says. Nurse Joy comes outside to see what's going on and she yells, "What are you doing here?" "We've come for that Naruto brat," James yells. "For one thing, Naruto isn't a brat," Nurse Joy yells, "and second, he isn't here. He said he was heading for Pewter City." "Let's head for Pewter City then," James says, and they fly off towards Pewter City. Nurse Joy add into the Pokemon Center and calls the officer Jenny of Pewter City and says, "Be on the lookout, we have some Team Rocket members headed in your direction." The officer Jenny replies, "Roger, we'll keep on the lookout for the Team Rocket members," and then they hang up. Naruto World. While the Anbu who was following Rock Lee heads back to report to Lady Tsunade in the Leaf's maximum security prison Mizuki is filled with rage about what Naruto did to him. "Darn that demon brat," Mizuki thinks, "how dare he do that to me? I will get my revenge on him if it's the last thing that I do," and then hears the guards near him. "Did you hear that Naruto disappeared mysteriously?" Guard 1 says. "Yeah, no one knows what happened to him." Guard 2 says, "I think that everyone know about it since the Hyugas keep on about it since Hinata Hyuga also disappeared with Naruto." "That's true," Guard 1 says, and then after a moment of silence he adds, "I saw something strange happening on my way here." "What was that?" Guard 2 asks. "One of Guy's students, Rock Lee, I believe, was headed towards Naruto's last known spot and an Anbu was following after him." Guard 1 replies, "Do you think that Guy's student knows something that we don't?" Guard 2 asks. "The Hokage obviously believes that he does," Guard 1 replies, "otherwise she wouldn't be sending an Anbu to follow him to the Valley of the End." "That's true," Guard 2 says. "Might as well start getting the prisoners their lunch." "Might as well," Guard 1 says, and they both head to grab the food to give to their prisoners. So, Mizuki thinks, the demon brat is alone with the Hyuga heir and possibly the taijutsu weakling. This must be my lucky day. Now all I need to do is break out of here and take my revenge. I've gotten much stronger since I've been here, and the next time I see that demon brat I'll kill him. Will Jesse, James, and Meowth get caught by the cops? Will Naruto and Hinata ever take their relationship further on their own? Will Mew actually give up on trying to push their relationship? What will happen with Rock Lee? And will Mizuki be able to escape, find Naruto, and kill him? Keep reading to find out, and I would politely request for whoever is ready in this to review the story, saying what you like about it or what things need to be changed or fixed. Since we last saw everyone, a few days have passed. Naruto, Hinata, Ash, and Misty have been training. Rock Lee has kept himself busy with his basic training and occasionally having a battle against one of Naruto's or Hinata's Pokemon when either one requested it. Jesse, James, and Meowth upon Arriving at Pewter City and see the cops on the lookout for something or someone, they disguise themselves and get a job at a local ramen shop. Right now we see Naruto, Hinata, and Rock Lee meeting up with Ash and Misty at the path to Pewter City. Hinata is wearing the dress she got from Misty. "Hey Ash, what's up?" Naruto asks. "We've just been waiting for you and Hinata." Ash replies, "By the way, who's the new guy?" He asks. "Oh yeah." Naruto says, "Ash, Misty, this is Rock Lee, but we call him Bushy Zero Brows for obvious reasons. He's from the same place we come from in Bushy Brows. This is Ash and Misty." "Pleased to meet you both," Rock Lee says. "Pleasure to meet you, Rock Lee," both Ash and Misty say. "Let's go ahead and head out now," Naruto says. "Sure thing," Ash says. Just then Samurai comes out of hiding and says, "I've finally found you." "Who is this?" Naruto asks. Ash replies, "This is Samurai. I had a Pokemon battle with him a few days ago and beat him. Then I mentioned that you were a trainer from Pallet Town and he wanted to battle you. And I've been waiting for you to show up ever since I lost to Ash." Samurai says. "Sorry Samurai, it looks like you were slightly misinformed." Naruto says, "I don't actually come from Pallet Town. I'm from another world and was accidentally transported here. I only started my Pokemon journey from Pallet Town. It doesn't matter to me," Samurai says. "I still want to battle you anyway." "Alright, but I have one condition," Naruto says. "What's that?" Samurai asks. "You have to all of your Pokemon against one of my Pokemon." Naruto replies. "Okay, but that really going to give an advantage?" Samurai says. "Trust me," Naruto says, "this is the only chance you have to win." "Don't be so cocky," Samurai says. "I'm not being cocky," Naruto says. "I just know that you have slim to no chance of winning." "Bring it on then," Samurai says. "Excuse me," Ash says, causing both Naruto and Samurai to look at him. "Before you even have your battle, we need to have an appropriate battle area." Everyone heads towards the nearest clearing large enough to have a Pokemon battle, and when reaching it, Ash says, "Now you can have it all you want." Ash, Misty, Hinata, and Rock Lee watch from the sidelines as the battle is about to start. "Okay, come on out, Pinsir, Butterfree, and Beedrill," Samurai says as he releases his Pokemon. "Let's do this," Naruto says. "Pokeball go," and out of the Pokeball comes Abra. "You're serious?" Samurai says. "What can an Abra do against my Pokemon?" "You'll see soon enough," Naruto says. "Let's finish this up now," Samurai says. Pinsir Tackle, Beedrill Pin Needle, Butterfree Gust. As each of Samurai's Pokemon launch their attacks, Naruto says, "Abra counter with Teleport and Shadow Clone Jutsu," and Abra disappears for a second to have 10 Abras suddenly appear. "So UGHT Abra double team, that's not going to help you," Samurai says. Beedrill use Pin Needle and target all the Abras, and Beedrill launches pins from its lance-like arms and rotates its body to try to hit all the Abras. Abra Teleport and use Rasengan, Naruto says. "Quick, dodge," Samurai says. "It's too late," Naruto says, and suddenly each of Samurai's Pokemon are hit by 3 Rasengans, causing them to be ground into the dirt and making a big dust cloud. When the dust clears, Abra is still standing with all the clone gone and all 3 of Samurai's Pokemon are knocked out. "Looks like I win," Naruto says. "How did you do that?" Samurai asks. "I've never even seen that last attack before. I did tell you that I was from a different world, and on our world we use a similar type of energy to use attacks. And that last attack was an attack from our world," Naruto says. "It's no wonder you've never seen it before." Naruto," Hinata says. "What's wrong, Hinata?" Naruto asks. "Something's happening with Abra," Hinata replies. Naruto looks over and sees Abra slowly get brighter until he glows white. "Oh, Abra's finally evolving," Naruto says, and Abra changes shape and then stops glowing. "Congrats on your evolution, Abra," Hinata says. "He's no longer Abra anymore," Naruto says. "He's now Kadabra, but it will take some time to get used to calling you Kadabra." "Return Kadabra," Naruto says, and Kadabra returns to his Pokeball. "Return Pinsir, Butterfree, Beedrill," Samurai says, and they return to their own Pokeball. "Don't feel bad, Samurai," Naruto says. "We've been training, and with knowledge from our own world it was unlikely for you to win." "Yeah, you had a big advantage this time," Samurai says, but next time you won't have any tricks up your sleeve and I'll be much stronger. And he puts out his hand. Don't Ink, you'll have it easy next time though, Naruto says and clasps Samurai's hand. That's sweet, Hinata says. You've become great friends. Friends, Naruto and Samurai say, more like rivals. Just like you and Sasuke were rivals. Naruto, Hinata says. Hey, that was different, Naruto says. Doesn't look all that different to me, Hinata says. The roles are just reversed here. Fine, Naruto says. Think what you want to think. See you later, Samurai says. I better get to training my Pokemon if I want to beat you. Well, Naruto says, better get to Pewter City. Everyone heads to Pewter City, and when the why get out of the forest, they are on a hill with a rock that overlooks Pewter City, and Naruto sits on the rock to take in the view of it. Excuse me, young man, a mountain man with a brown beard says on a grassy area just below them. Sir, Naruto says, may I politely ask who you are and what you want? My name is Flint, the man says, and you're sitting on my merchandise. Everyone looks over and see shelves with rocks on them. Naruto gets up and says, sorry about that, and head down to meet the man. When they reach Flint, Naruto asks, why do you sell rocks? Flint replies, Pewter City is the city of Gray and is known for its love of rocks, so what better than to sell rocks? Perhaps sculptures made out of stone and not just plain rocks. Naruto says, except for the fact that I don't know how to make sculptures, Flint says. Then why do you stay here doing something so pointless? Naruto asks. I'd rather not talk about it, Flint says. Well then, can you at least point the way to the Pokemon Center? Naruto asks. I'll do better than that, Flint says. I'll take you there. A few minutes later they arrive at the Pokemon Center and Flint says, I'll be leaving now. Hope you have a fun time with your rocks, Naruto says as Flint leaves. Everyone walks in and a familiar voice says, welcome, and they see Nurse Joy at the front desk. Nurse Joy, when did you get here? Naruto asks. What are you talking about? Nurse Joy asks. Weren't you in Viridian City when we came in? Naruto asks. No, that wasn't me. Nurse Joy says. The Nurse Joy station there is my little sister. Why is it that you look the same and have the same name as your sister? Naruto asks. I guess it would be because our mom liked the name Joy and we decided on having similar hairstyles and using similar makeup when we both became nurses, Nurse Joy says. That would explain a lot, Naruto says. Now is there something I can help you with? Nurse Joy asks. Could you go ahead and heal our Pokemon? Naruto asks. Sure thing, Nurse Joy says. Everyone grabs their Pokeballs in a tray and put their Pokeballs on their own tray, and Ash sets an exhausted-looking Pikachu on his tray. Then they all hand them over to Nurse Joy. It'll take a few minutes to heal all of your Pokemon, Nurse Joy says and takes them to the back. Might as well call Professor Oak, Ash says and heads over to one of the videophones and dials Professor Oak number. After about a minute Professor Oak picks up, the screen being blank, and says, yes, who is it? It's Ash, Professor Oak, Ash says. Hold on a second, let me turn on the visual, and in a second Professor Oak appears on the screen. That's much better, Professor Oak says. How have you been? He asks. We've been fine, Ash says. We just arrived in Pewter City. Pewter City Professor Oak says. Do you plan on challenging Brock to win his gym badge? He asks. Of course, Ash says. If I'm going to be a Pokemon master I have to start somewhere. That's good to hear, Professor Oak says. Whoa. Do you get Naruto and let me talk to him for a bit? He asks. Sure thing, Ash says. Hey Naruto, could you come over here for a bit? Sure thing, Naruto says. Hinata, Rock Lee, would you join me? He asks. Okay. They both say. Naruto, Hinata, and Rock Lee head over to Ash and asks. What is it? Professor Oak would just like to you for a little bit, that's all, Ash says and hands Naruto the phone. Hey old man, how's it going? Naruto asks. Everything has been going perfectly fine, Professor Oak says and then notices Rock Lee. I see that you've made a new friend. Yeah, I almost forgot, Naruto says. Professor Oak, this is Rock Lee. Rock Lee, this is Professor Oak. Rock Lee comes from where we are. Oh, is that right? Professor Oak says. Did Naruto explain to you what's going on? He asks. Yeah, Naruto. Oh explained everything. Lee says, and seeing as I'm going to be here for a while and may need some extra protection, could I request to become a trainer as well? That shouldn't be a problem, Professor. Oak says. First let me get a Pokédex for you and then you just need to choose a starter Pokémon, and since I don't have any of the original starters you get your choice. Are there any Pokémon that just use taijutsu moves? Lee asks. Professor Oak says with a confused look on his face. Pokémon that would only attack by punching or kicking, Naruto says, clarifying things. Oh, the Pokémon you want. Or fighting types, Professor Oak says. That makes things easier, and along the side of the screen a list of fighting types appear on the side of the screen. After a couple of minutes of looking, Lee says, I've decided to pick Hitmonlee. Okay, Professor Oak says. Just give me a couple minutes to acquire Hitmonlee and transport it to you along with your Pokédex, and after a couple of minutes the Pokéball containing Hitmonlee, Lee's Pokédex, and 6 extra Pokéballs are sent through the teleport that is right next to the phone. Thanks, Professor, Lee says. No problem, Professor Oak says. I have one more thing I want to talk to you about. What's that? Naruto asks. It's about the Pokemon League Challenge, Professor Oak says. I was wondering if any of you were going to enter it. Almost definitely. Telly be entering it, Naruto says. It will be a good way to get my Pokemon stronger as well as learning a few more tricks that I can use back in my world. How about you two? Professor Oak asks Hinata and Rock Lee. I'd rather stick to personal training or sparring with my Pokemon. Rock Lee says. How about you, Hinata? Professor Oak asks. Quite honestly, I really don't like fighting unless absolute. Why necessary? Hinata says, so I won't be entering into it. That's one of the things that I really like about you, Hinata, Naruto says as he gives her a hug. That kind heart of yours. That's perfectly fine, Professor Oak says. Now Naruto makes certain that you and Ash sign up at the Pokemon Center where you're at and then go to the gym to battle the gym leader. Gotcha, Professor, Naruto says. Good luck both of you, Professor Oak says. See you later, Professor, Naruto says and hangs up. After hanging up, Professor Oak thinks. Naruto shouldn't have any problems with Brock, but Ash is really at a disadvantage. I wonder if he'll be able to beat Brock the first time around. Naruto walks over to Ash and Ash asks, what did Professor Oak want? He wanted to ask us if any of us were entering the Pokemon League Challenge, Naruto replies, as well as getting bushy brows officiated as a trainer. Do you think any more of your friends will show up? Ash asks. I really don't know, Naruto says, from what bushy brows said. There's a portal in my world that leads to this world, which means that it's very possible that more of friends could show up. Is that all Professor Oak wanted? Ash asks. Actually no, he want to remind us to officially sign up here for the Pokemon League Challenge and to wish us luck in our gym battle. Naruto says. Well, let's go ahead and get it done then, Ash says. Naruto and Ash walk up to Nurse Joy, whom is facing away from them, and Ash says, Nurse Joy. Nurse Joy turns and faces them and says, yes, Naruto and I would like to sign up for the Pokemon League Challenge, Ash says. Sir, thing, Nurse Joy says, just let me have your Pokédex for a few seconds. Naruto and Ash hand over their Pokédex and Nurse Joy takes them and puts them in a machine, and after few seconds the Pokédexes come out. Nurse Joy takes them, hands them back to Naruto and Ash and says, there, you're all set up. Thanks a lot, they both say. Sure thing, and your Pokemon are fully healed, Nurse Joy says and heads to the back to get their Pokemon. Hey Hinata, Misty, Naruto says. Yeah, they both say. Our Pokemon are fully healed, Naruto says. We'll be right there, they both say, and they get up and walk over to Naruto and Ash. Nurse Joy returns with their Pokemon and they all grab their Pokeballs while Pikachu climbs onto Ash's shoulder. Feel better, Pikachu? Ash asks. Pikachu nods its head. See you later, Nurse Joy, Ash says. We're heading out to challenge the gym leader Brock. See you later, Nurse Joy says. Everyone heads out and a few minutes later arrive at the Pewter City Pokemon Gym and STA. Ending in front of the door. Ash says, "Well, here we go," and open up the door and sees a dark room. As the door opens up, they all hear, "Who dares challenge Brock, the gym leader?" And the lights come up revealing Brock and his Pokemon battle arena. "I Ash Ketchum from the town of Pallet challenge you," Ash says, and they all enter the room. As soon as Brock sees Hinata, he rushes over and says, "I'm sorry about acting like that. I didn't realize there was a beautiful lady present," and takes her hand and kisses it. Hinata blushes at this action, and Naruto is angered by Brock's action and says, "Shadow Clo Ne Jutsu," and 4 Naruto clones surround Brock. "Huh, what's going on?" Brock asks, seeing that he's surrounded by 4 people who weren't there before. The 4 clones slide on the ground towards Brock and say, "Na-ru-to," and then reach Brock, kicking him up into the air and then disappearing, and the original Naruto jumps above Brock and drop kicks him, saying, "Uzumaki Barrage," sending Brock back to Earth, and Brock hits, leaving a crater in the floor. Naruto lands and yells, "Don't you ever do something like that to Hinata ever again, she's mine." Hinata looks at Brock and asks, "Don't you think that you overdid it a little bit?" "Definitely not." Naruto replies, "I could have Rasenganed him into the wall. Now that would be overdoing it." "Are you sure he's fine?" Hinata asks. "Yeah." Naruto replies, "He'll wake up soon with a little bit of a headache, that's all." When Naruto says this, Brock gets up and says, "Note to self, don't anger the blonde spiky-haired kid. Are you all right?" Hinata asks. "Yeah." Brock replies, "Just have a little bit of a headache, that's all. That'll teach you for hitting on my girlfriend," Naruto says. "I'm sorry," Brock says, "if I had known that she was your girlfriend, I wouldn't have tried hitting on her." "Excuse me," Ash says. "Right," Brock says, "now for your challenge. It will be a 2-on-2 battle where you may switch out but I may not." "Okay," Ash says. "You stay on this side of the arena, and as soon as I get to the other side we'll begin our battle." "Fine by me," Ash says. A few minutes later, Brock reaches the other side of the arena, and Naruto, Hinata, Rock Lee, and Misty are sitting on the sidelines watching. "I'll let you choose your Pokemon first," Brock says. "Alright Pikachu, go," Ash says. Pikachu says with a battle-ready look on his face as he jumps from Ash's shoulder. "Onix, go," Brock says as he throws a Pokeball, and out of it comes a giant rock snake. "Let's finish this quickly," Ash says. "Pikachu, use Thunderbolt." Pikachu says as he shoots a bolt of lightning at Onix, and it hits, appearing to do nothing. "What happened?" Ash asks. "Such weak electric attacks won't work on my Onix," Brock says. "Now Onix, slam your tail down on Pikachu," and Onix swings its tail down towards Pikachu. "Pikachu, dodge with quick attack," Ash says, and Pikachu runs quickly with a white streak behind him and just barely manages to get away before Onix's tail hits. Darn it, Ash thinks. Pikachu's strongest attack won't work against Onix. There's nothing Pikachu can do, and says, "Pikachu, return," and Pikachu returns to the sidelines. "Will you give up, seeing as it's useless to battle me?" Brock says. "Never," Ash says. "I still have 1 Pokemon left to use," and grabs a Pokeball, throwing it, saying, "Go Fearow," and a big bird Pokemon with long wingspan and long neck with a big beak comes out. Lucky Spearow evolved yesterday. This should give him some problems. Let's see if your Fearow can help you out," Brock says. "Fearow use Drill Peck," Ash says, and Fearow flies at Onix with his beak spinning, and when he hits Onix he barely leaves a scratch. "Now Onix, knock Fearow out of the sky with your tail," and Onix hits Fearow, knocking him to the ground and knocking him out. "Do you wish to continue?" Brock says. "I'd rather not," Ash says, "because I couldn't stand it if Pikachu got badly injured from this battle." "If that is your wish, I'll respect it," Brock says. "Onix, return," and Onix returns to its Pokeball. "Fearow, return," Ash says, and Fearow returns to his Pokeball. "Come back when you are stronger," Brock says, and starts to head out of the arena. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" Naruto yells. "You still have 1 more challenger." "And you would be?" Brock asks. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki from the Hidden Leaf Village in the Land of Fire," Naruto says. "Hidden Leaf Village?" Brock says. "Never heard of it. Not surprising, as I'm not from your world," Naruto says. Not from our world, Brock thinks. No wonder he was able to do something like that. This should be very interesting. And says, I accept your challenge. Just come and switch out for Ash. As Naruto heads for the spot where Ash was, Ash passes by and whispers, make sure you take this guy down. Naruto whispers back, don't worry, I will. When Naruto reaches the trainer box in the arena, Brock says, you know the rules, now let's get this started. Naruto replies, I'm going to knock you down a peg by the time I'm finished. Bring it on then, Brock says. Naruto world. The Anbu who was following Lee arrives back at Konoha and heads for the Hokage's office. When he arrives, he enters and says, Lady Hokage, I have important news. Yes, what is it? Tsunade asks. Before the Anbu has a chance to answer, a Konoha Chunin comes in and says, Lady Hokage, we have an emergency. What is it this time? Tsunade asks. Mizuki has caused a prison break with him and everyone else escaping from jail, the Konoha Chunin replies. Get everyone you can and have them round up the prisoners. Tsunade says. Yes ma'am, the Konoha Chunin says and quickly leaves. Sorry about this, Tsunade says to the Anbu, could you get Neji Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Tenten for me? She asks. Of course Lady Hokage, the Anbu replies. A few minutes later, Neji Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Tenten stand in front of Tsunade with the Anbu, and Tsunade says, now go join the others. Yes ma'am, the Anbu says. What is it? Neji asks respectfully. Mizuki caused a massive prison breakout. Tsunade replies, I'm sure that this is to cover his tracks so that he can go after Naruto. I would like you to track down Mizuki and follow him. If anyone can find Naruto, I'm sure he can. Of course Lady Hokage, Neji says, and they all leave her office. Will Naruto be able to beat Brock? How will Ash get stronger before challenging Brock again? Who is Flint really? Will Mizuki be able to find Naruto? And will Neji, Kiba, and Tenten manage to find Mizuki? Find out next time on Naruto's New Adventure. I would politely request for whoever is reading this to review the story. Saying what you like about it or what things need to be changed or fixed. Last time on Naruto's New Adventure, Naruto and friends arrived in Pewter City and challenged Brock to a gym battle. Ash lost easily against Brock, and now Naruto is getting ready to face Brock. Are you sure you want to do this? Brock asks. You saw how easily I defeated Ash. You just worry about yourself, Naruto replies. Fine, let's do this then. Brock says, go Geodude, and throws a Pokeball, and out of it appears a giant floating boulder creature. Okay, let's go Growlithe, Naruto says and throws a Pokeball and Growlithe appears. Go Naruto, Lee says, defeat him using the power of youth, and gives Naruto a thumbs up while grinning at him. Now's not a good time, Lee, Naruto says. Excuse me, Brock says, but can we start now? Let's, Naruto says. Growlithe use flamethrower, Naruto says, and Growlithe launches a beam of fire and Geodude becomes engulfed in the flames. Yes, direct hit, Naruto says. Don't be so sure that you've won, Brock says, and when the flames die down, Geodude floats there looking completely unharmed. I've trained my Pokemon to stand up to most attacks, Brock says. You'll need to do better than that. Let's try this then, Naruto says. Growlithe use Shadow Clone Jutsu, and a moment later 4 Growliths appear and surround Geodude. A double team attack Brock says. That's not going to help you. Naruto smiles at this. Growlithe use flamethrower, and each of the Growliths launch flames at Geodude, and when they hit Geodude, the room heats up quickly. Wait a minute, Brock says. Shush. Each one of them is real, and thinks, but where did they come from? Naruto didn't release any other Pokemon. It's like they appeared out of nowhere. Growlithe use Tackle Barrage, Naruto says. ND4 of the Growlithe run towards Geodude in a familiar fashion. His Growlithe is about to attack with a version of the attack that he hit me with. Alright then, Brock thinks and says, Geodude Sue. NTER with Rock Throw, and Geodude hits the ground, breaking up the floor and tossing the rocks at the incoming Growliths, and when they hit the Growlithe they disappear in a puff of smoke, and out of a puff of smoke comes the real Growlithe and gets below Geodude. Now launch Geodude up with flamethrower, Naruto says. Quick Geodude defense curl, Brock says, and Geodude manages to put up a miniature S. healed around itself just as Growlithe launches a flamethrower so strong that it sends Geodude flying upward. Now jump and finish it with Fire Claws, Naruto says. Fire Claws. Everyone yells in a questioning way. Growlithe jumps up above Geodude and the claws on Growlithe's front paws starts growing with flames coming out of them and then slashes launching Geodude back down to the ground with such force that it creates a large crater and Geodude lies in the center unconscious. It looks like you've trained your Pokemon to learn moves that they wouldn't normally learn, Brock says. Good job, Jay. Odude now return, and Geodude returns to its Pokeball. You've done well to defeat Geodude, Brock says. Now let's see if you can defeat Onix, Brock says and throws Onix's Pokeball and Onix appears on the field. Growlithe has used up a lot of energy beating Geodude, Naruto thinks. I don't know how long he'll be able to last. Better end this quickly, Naruto thinks and says. Growlithe use Shadow Claw, Nei Jutsu and Flamethrower, and 4 Growliths appear and all launch a Flamethrower at Onix. Onix avoid it with Dig, Brock says and Onix burrows underground just barely avoiding the flamethrowers. Growliths start looking around trying to figure out where Onix will appear and Naruto says, Growlithe calm down. Just use your training to sense where Onix is underground, and the Growliths close their eyes and just stand there. Nothing happens for a couple of minutes and then suddenly the Growliths jump up into the air and Onix comes up from under the ground. Now strike with Fire Claws, Naruto says. The Growliths come down and strike with Fire Claws but it hardly does anything to Onix and Onix quickly strikes with its tail hitting all the Growliths causing the clones to disappear and ending the real Growlithe flying into the wall. Growlithe falls to the floor and stays still for a second. Growlithe, are you okay? Naruto yells and Growlithe responds by getting up from the ground slowly. Can you continue? Naruto asks. Growl. Growlithe says and nods his head. Okay. Naruto says, we have one last chance here. Even though you haven't mastered this move yet we have no choice. Use Shadow Clone Jutsu and Fire Rasengan. Fire Rasengan. Everyone says with the same reaction as with the Fire Claws. Quick Onix attack them before they launch their attack, Brock says and Onix rushes at the Growliths. Just before Onix reaches the Growliths they all launch their attack and hit Onix right in the face but Onix's momentum takes it through the attack and allows it to hit all the Growly. These causing the clones to disappear and the real Growlithe to be thrown against the wall and knocked out. Growlithe return. Naruto says and Growlithe returns to his Pokeball. You did a good job. Let's see which Pokemon Naruto will use now, Brock thinks. Let's go Kadabra, Naruto says and Kadabra appears. Onix use Bind, Brock says and Onix trows its tail out to prepare to squeeze Kadabra. Kadabra, use Teleport and follow it up with Rasengan, Naruto says and Abra disappears to appear next to Onix with a Rasengan in his hand. Onix use Dig to dodge, and Onix quickly dives underground. Now shoot P and use Slam on Kadabra, Brock says and Onix shoots out if the ground right below where Kadabra is. Quick Kadabra teleport and Rasengan, Naruto says. Too late, Brock says as Onix's slam attack hits. Kadabra sending him flying towards the ceiling and a second later Kadabra disappears and appears on Onix's head with a Rasengan in his hand and hits Onix with it grinding Onix into the ground. Onix, now use Bind, Brock says and Onix manages to get a hold of Kadabra this time and starts squeezing. Kadabra get out of there with Teleport, Naruto says and Kadabra disappears. Now Onix starts swinging our tail in a circle, and Onix starts swinging its tail and just as Kadabra appears he gets hit by Onix's tail and sent flying. Quick Kadabra teleport to the far side of the arena, Naruto says and Kadabra disappears and reappears out of the way of Onix's swinging tail. That bought me some time, Naruto thinks, but Brock has figured out almost all of my strategies and how to counter them. I could use Confusion but beside being a cheap move where the opponent has no control over themselves Onix is so heavy that I don't know if I could do much. I would rather not use Confusion if I can help it. Don't give up Naruto. Lee yells, the power of youth will help you defeat him just like it helped you defeat Neji in the Chunin exams. Lee's cheering doesn't exactly help, Naruto thinks, but he has given me an idea. Onix tackle Kadabra from underground, Brock says, suddenly snapping Naruto out of his thoughts as Onix sends Kadabra flying. Kadabra use teleport and shadow clone jutsu, Naruto says while sending a message telepathically to Kadabra. Kadabra disappears and 10 Kadabras appear. Onyx hit them all with your tail, Brock says, and Onyx hits all of them with its tail, causing them to all disappear. Now where's the original? Thinks Brock. Naruto smiles and Brock notices and thinks, what is he smiling about? Kadabra jump and use Rasengan, Naruto says. What is he talking about? Inks Brock, and seeing Kadabra jump out of the hole Onyx made says, oh no. Quick Onyx use Bide, and Onyx starts glowing. It's too late, Naruto says as Kadabra hits Onyx with the Rasengan, knocking Onyx to the ground. Now finish it with Shadow Clone Jutsu and Rasengan, Naruto says, and Kadabra make 4 clones all with a Rasengan and strike at Onyx with them. Just as the Rasengans hit, damaging Onyx, and energy comes out of Onyx, hitting all the Kadabras, causing the clones to disappear and launching the real one towards the wall, and Kadabra hits the wall. Both of them lay on the ground and slowly start to rise. Come on Kadabra, you can do it, Naruto yells. Come on Onyx, you can't let this brat beat us, Brock says. Both of them manage to fully get up and both Brock and Naruto say, yes. Let's continue this, Naruto says, and then suddenly Onyx collapses with Kadabra collapsing just a little bit later than Onyx, and both lay there knocked out. So who won? Naruto asks. Both of our Pokemon are knocked out at the same time, which means that we tied, Brock says. Kadabra return, Naruto says, and after Kadabra returns to his Pokeball starts walking away. Where do you think you're going? Brock asks, angered. You said that I needed to beat you in order to get the badge, and I failed to do that, which means that I need to train more, but I first need to head to the Pokemon Center to heal my Pokemon, Naruto replies. That may be true, but in cases of ties the gym leader decides whether or not to award the gym badge to the challenger, Brock says. What are you saying? Naruto asks. You gave me the greatest challenge that I had in a long time. Which mean that I feel that you've earned this boulder badge, Brock says, and holds out the boulder badge. A badge shaped like an octagon and colored gray for those who haven't watched Pokemon. Really? Naruto asks. Yes, Brock says. Now get over here to claim your badge, but first Onyx return, and after Onyx returns to its Pokeball, Naruto walks over to Brock. ND says, thank you for this, and takes the boulder badge from him. There's one more thing I have to give you, Brock says, and takes out a disc on a platform. What's that? Naruto asks. This is a nickel machine, or TM for short, Brock says. What does it do? Naruto asks. A TM is used to teach your Pokemon a move, but it can only be used once, so choose wisely, Brock says. What move is this one? Naruto asks. This one is called Bide, Brock says. This attack collects damage done to you and then releases at your opponent at 2 times the damage. Pretty much a last-ditch move, Naruto says. Pretty much, Brock says, unless your Pokemon knows a move like Recover to heal the damage that your Pokemon has taken. Thanks for that information, Naruto says. You're welcome, Brock says. By this time everyone else has walked over to where Naruto and Brock are taking, and Ash asks, when is the next time that I can challenge you? The earliest that you could challenge me would be tomorrow, Brock says. I need to take my Pokemon to the Pokemon Center to be healed, and then I need to fix up the gym's arena. You go ahead and head out, Brock, Naruto says. I'll take care of fixing up the gym. Thanks Naruto, Brock says. It's the least that I could do, Naruto says. I'll stick around and help out, Naruto, Hinata says. All right, Ash says. See you later. After everyone has left the gym, Naruto says, Ime to get to work. Naruto, may I ask you something? Hinata asks. Beside the question you just asked? Sure thing, Naruto says, but first let me create enough clones to clean up this mess, and says shish. Ado clone jutsu, making about 50 clones, and they start cleaning up the mess made by their gym battle. Go ahead and ask your question, Naruto says. I was wondering, Hinata says. Let me guess, Yuto says. You were going to ask how I was able to teach Growlithe Fire Claws and the Fire Rasengan. Exactly, Hinata says. It's understandable since you never saw me training Growlithe those moves, Naruto says. So how did you teach him? Hinata asks. Before I tell you that, there's something else I need to tell you. Naruto says. What's that? Hinata asks. I have been extremely scared of telling Ple this because the village already treated me like an outcast, and just when I started making friends I was worried that if they found out they would treat me like all the other villagers, Naruto says. What is that? Hinata asks, already having a clue about what he is about to say. The fact that the nine-tailed fox spirit that attacked our village nearly 14 years ago is sealed inside of me, Naruto says, and then looks down and tenses up waiting for Hinata's reaction. Hinata just smiles and lifts his head up until he is looking at her and says, I'm happy you told me. Wait, you're not scared of me? Naruto says with a slightly confused look on his face. Hinata chuckles a little bit and says, why would I be scared of something that I already knew? How long have you known? Naruto asks. I've known since our academy days, Hinata replies. Then why was I always alone when you could have been next to me cheering me up? Naruto asks. Hinata drops her head in shame and says, I was scared of how my father would react to my being around you like that, then raises her head with a smile on her face and adds, but I was never scared of you. I saw that you were nothing like a demon in my feeling ours you were because of you and not because of something inside of you. Now I just have one thing to ask you, Naruto says. What's that? Hinata asks. If your father were to show up and forbid you from being in a relationship with me, how would you react? Naruto asks. I could care less about what he says. If we're to say that, I would tell him that I would rather remain in this world with you than be home without you, Hinata replies. Naruto gives Hinata a giant hug, kisses her on the cheek and whispers in her ear, thank you. For what? Hinata asks. For your willingness to throw away everything just to be with me. Naruto replies. I just want to be with you no matter what, Hinata says, and that's why I'm so grateful, Naruto says. Excuse me boss, one of the clones says, but we've finished fixing everything. Good job you guys, Naruto says, you can leave now. All right, the clones say, and all disappear in a puff of smoke. Naruto and Hinata sit there for a few more minutes hugging each other, and then Naruto says, I'm starting to get hungry. How about I take you out to eat? Sure thing, Hinata says. As they start to leave, Hinata says, you never did tell me how you trained Growlithe without me knowing. That's actually simple, Naruto says. Since the Pokeball acts similar to the seal the Kyuubi is trapped in, it was just a matter of having us be together with the Kyuubi while we were asleep and then training with him. Wouldn't you just wake up exhausted? Hinata asks. That was the interesting thing, Naruto says. To us the training was just like a dream you remember fully. We could have days of training, remember everything, and yet not be tired when we wake up. I wonder if the Kyuubi could do something like that for us, Hinata says. I don't know, but I could certainly ask him, Naruto says, and they both leave the gym. Back with Ash and everyone else, they are all just now entering the Pokemon Center. Welcome, Nurse Joy says, how are you all doing? We're doing just fine, Ash says, but we do have some Pokemon for you to heal. Nurse Joy sees Brock with them and says, it's rare to see you in here. Brock replies, yeah, that Naruto kid is a strong trainer. He really gave me a run for my money. I guess you beat him then, Nurse Joy says. Actually we tied, Brock says, but to tie me is an accomplishment in itself, so I awarded him with the Boulder badge. Realizing Naruto and Hinata aren't with them, Nurse Joy asks, where are Naruto and Hinata? They stayed at the gym to clean up after the mess that Naruto and I made, Brock replies. It was that bad? Nurse Joy asks. She was just a result of how strong of a trainer Naruto is, Brock says. Okay, so Brock, your Onix and Geodude need healing, and which Pokemon did you need healed, Ash? Nurse Joy asks. My Fearow, Ash replies. Okay then, Nurse Joy says, I go ahead and start healing your Pokemon. How about you grab some of the supper that I made while you wait? Now that you mention it, I am a little bit hungry, Ash says, and hands over Fearow's Pokeball to Nurse Joy and then heads to the kitchen. Take good care of Geodude and Onix, Brock says as he hands over their Pokeballs. Don't I always, Nurse Joy says. I'll be back in a little bit, Brock says. I need to head home to make supper for my family. See you later, Nurse Joy says. Back with Naruto and Hinata, they have been heading back to the Pokemon Center while looking for somewhere to eat. It seems odd that there is no place to eat out around here, Naruto says. It doesn't matter, Hinata says, at least we'll get something to eat when we get to the Pokemon Center. But it's not the same, Naruto says. I was wanting to take you out and treat you to show how grateful I am. Don't worry about it, Hinata says. Perhaps I can do something else to show how thankful I am to you. Naruto says. Please stop it, Hinata says. You really don't have to do anything, but I want to, Naruto says. It's not a matter of whether or not you want to, Hinata says, it is a matter that you can't do anything right now that matters. Fine, Naruto says, slightly pouting. About halfway to the Pokemon Center, Naruto and Hinata meet up with Flint. What's going on? Flint asks. I've finished cleaning up the gym after my battle with Brock, Naruto says, and now we are headed back to the Pokemon Center for some supper, even though I wanted to find some place to take Hinata out to eat. I remember being young like that, Flint says. The problem is that Pewter City isn't exactly known for its out-to-eat restaurants. I only know of one place where you can actually eat out, and it's not really the kind of place I would really be thinking about taking a girl on a date. It really doesn't matter, Naruto says. Where we come from there aren't too many fancy restaurants. It would probably feel like we were back home. That's good to hear, Flint says. I was about to head there. Would you like me to take you there? He asks. That would be great, Naruto says. Follow me then, Flint says, and starts walking off. On the way there, Naruto asks, what is the restaurant? I wouldn't exactly call it a restaurant, Flint says. It is actually an outdoor ramen stand. Sounds pretty close to some thing back home, Naruto says. I wonder if this ramen will taste as good as their ramen. When they reach the stand, Flint walks up and says, 1 extra large bowl of miso pork ramen. That'll be $1, the man says. Here you go, Flint says, and hands over a $1 bill. I completely forgot until now, Naruto says, slightly panicked. What did you forget? Flint asks. We don't have the right form of money to buy stuff, Naruto replies. That's not a problem, Flint says. Why do you say that? Naruto asks. As a Pokemon trainer, you start out with money to buy items and food and anything else you possibly want, Flint replies. Your Pokédex works like a debit card and also keeps track of the money you make and spend. How do you make money exactly? Naruto asks. Whenever you beat a trainer or a gym leader, you earn money, Flint replies. Wouldn't that mean that your opponent loses money? Naruto asks. No, Flint replies. Basically, there is prize money that the winner of the battle gets awarded. How does that even work? Naruto asks. I don't really know, Flint says, but my best guess would be that there are satellites in the sky that keep track of every Pokédex and which person wins in a battle. I wonder why Brock would try so hard to win then, Naruto says. One reason is that he is a gym leader and can't go easy on any opponent, Flint says, and the other reason is that he has many blings and taking care of them costs a lot, which means that he needs to win as many battles as possible. How do you know that? Naruto asks. Does that really matter? Flint asks. Just go ahead and order up. I guess you're right, Naruto says. 2 extra large bowls of miso pork ramen. That'll be $2, the man says. Here you go, Naruto says, and hands the man his Pokédex. The man scans the Pokédex on a machine and then hands it back to Naruto and then heads to the back where he says to Meowth, we need 2 more extra large bowls of miso pork ramen. It sure has been busy today, Meowth says. Don't complain, James says. Since Giovanni fired us, this is the only way we can make any money in order to possibly catch Naruto and Mew. A couple minutes later, Jessie comes out with 3 extra large bowls of miso pork ramen and says, here you go, and gives everyone their bowl of ramen. Do I know you from somewhere? Hinata asks. You look familiar. Jessie freezes for a second, realizing who gave the ramen to, and then replies, that can't be possible. I've been working here for years. Oh, sorry, my mistake, Hinata says. Jessie heads to back and says, Naruto and Hinata are here at the stand. Let's not blow our cover yet, James says, we'll leave them alone for now. While eating the ramen, Naruto says, this ramen tastes a little strange. What tastes strange is probably the synthesized meat, Flint says, synthesized meat. Naruto asks, yeah, any restaurant that deals with meat uses a replicator to create meat and they could never get the taste right, Flint says, but since I've eaten it for so long I've gotten used to it. Well, food is food, Naruto says, might as well not let it go to waste, and finishes up his bowl of ramen. After everyone has finished eating, Naruto and Hinata say go. Bye to Flint and head back to the Pokemon Center. When Naruto and Hinata enter into the Pokemon Center, they see Ash over at the video phone talking to Professor Oak. How did your battle with Brock go? Professor Oak asks. I completely lost to Brock, Ash replies. Just keep at it and eventually you'll beat him, Professor Oak says. Anyway, my Fearow took a big beating from Brock's Pokemon and wool. D'd like you to take care of him for a little bit, Ash says. Not a problem, Professor Oak says. Just put Fearow's Pokeball in the teleporter next to you and I'll receive it on my end. Okay, Ash says and puts Fearow's Pokeball into the teleporter where it disappears in a flash of white light. Got it right here, Professor Oak says and shows the Pokeball to Ash. Take good care of Fearow, Ash says. I will, Professor Oak says. Goodbye, Professor Oak, Ash says. Talk to later, Ash, Professor Oak says back and Ash hangs up. I'll go ahead and heal your Pokemon, Naruto, Nurse Joy says. Ash turns around and sees Naruto and Hinata and asks, when did you get in? Just about a minute ago, Naruto replies. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to get some fresh air, Ash says. Go ahead, Naruto says. Ash walks out the Pokemon Center and meets Flint, who was secretly following Naruto and Hinata. From the look on your face I would guess that you lost to Brock. Flint says. You got that right, Ash says. What if I told you that I knew a way to power up your Pokemon quickly so that you could beat Brock, Flint says. Would you be doing anything illegal? Ash asks. Not at all, Flint says. Let's go then, Ash says. Follow me, Flint says and walks off. Naruto World. Neji, Kiba, and Tenten have been following Mizuki's trail for a while and it leads them all the way to the Valley of the End, but Mizuki's not there. Trail ends here, Kiba says. The scent just ends here, as all three of them stop short of the portal that Naruto and the Kyuubi created. Neji activates his Byakugan and says, he's nowhere nearby, but here is some sort of energy right in front of us. I guess we'll have to check that energy in front of us, Kiba says. It's the only lead we have, and all three of them walk into it and disappear. What does Flint have in mind? How will Kiba, Neji, and Tenten react when they find out where they were sent? Find out next time on Naruto's New Adventure. Please review. Neji, Tenten, and Kiba arrive in H's room, but Mizuki is nowhere to be seen. Where's Mizuki? Tenten asks. Kiba sniffs and says, Mizuki was here and not too long ago too. Neji activates his Byakugan for a moment and says, never mind that, I would like to know where we are. Nothing looks familiar. We can worry about that after we catch Mizuki, Tenten says. Guess you're right there, Neji says. With my nose he won't be able to get away, Kiba says. Now let's go after him, and runs out the room. Hey, wait for us, Tenten yells and they both chase after Kiba. As they chase down Mizuki by following his scent, Mizuki begins to sense there's someone following him and stops for a moment and makes a few hand signs, then keeps running. As they reach the spot that Mizuki made the hand signs, Kiba suddenly stops and Tenten asks, what's wrong, Kiba? His scent just suddenly stops here, Kiba says. Did he use a teleportation jutsu or something? Tenten asks. Neji activates his Byakugan and says, I'm not sure, but I don't see him anywhere. What should we do now? Tenten asks. Our mission is to catch Mizuki, Neji says. I'm sure if we keep heading along this path we'll find him eventually, and they keep running along the path. Pewter City. Ash follows Flint and eventually ends up at an old hydroelectric power plant. What are we doing here? Ash asks. If we can add electricity that we generate here into your Pikachu, we can make him many times more powerful and therefore able to beat Brock's Pokemon, Flint says. But I thought that electric-type moves wouldn't be able to work on his Pokemon. Ash says, they didn't work on him last time. Usually that is true, Flint says, but if you can generate enough electricity in the attacks, Brock's Pokemon won't be able to ground out all the electricity and therefore will take damage. That makes sense, Ash says. What can I do to help? After I hook up your Pikachu to the plant, I want you to go onto the paddle wheel and start walking to move it and generate the electricity, Flint says and opens up the door. In a few minutes Flint sets up everything and hooks up 2 cables to Pikachu's electric sacs and says, okay, you can go out onto the wheel now and start turning it. Ash goes out of a nearby window onto the wheel and grabs a hold of a bar and starts walking. Everything seems fine for a few minutes, but then he starts to hear Pikachu screaming in pain as the electricity in the axe begins to reach a point that Pikachu's body is not used to. Should I stop? Ash asks, worried about Pikachu. Keep going, Flint says, this is the only way to do this. Pikachu will be just fine. Quote, okay then, Ash says, thinking. Please hold on, buddy, I know it hurts, but it will help you out so much in the end, and continues his job. After another few minutes Flint says, okay, you can stop now, and Ash slows down, and when he stops he goes back through the window and sees Pikachu passed out. What have you done? Ash asks, horrified. Together we made Pikachu much stronger, Flint says, but for now Pikachu needs to rest up and allow its body to get used to how much electricity it now has. Pikachu is perfectly fine. He had better be, Ash says and picks up Pikachu and walks out the door and back towards the Pokemon Center. When he reaches the Pokemon Center it is getting pretty late and yet the gang is still up. Hey Ash, what's going on? Where've you been? Naruto asks. Just been out doing some intensive training with Pikachu, Ash says, and now we're both pretty tired and are going off to bed. We all might as well head off to bed as well, Naruto says, and they all get up and start walking with Ash. When they reach the rooms before they split up into boys and girls, they all wish each other goodnight and enter the rooms. As it starts to reach midnight we see Hinata sneak out of the girls' room and head for the boys' room. Once she gets into the room she finds Naruto and crawls into bed with him and hugs him as she starts to fall asleep and thinks, I'm sorry Naruto, but I really want to see Uddle with you, and quickly falls asleep holding her love. Will Neji, Tenten, and Kiba ever catch up? How will Naruto react to Hinata sleeping in the same bed with him? Keep reading to find out.